The candles burn low, their glow swimming in pools of amber along the walls. The air is thick with coal dust and damp wool, the scent of the Thames winding its way even into parlours lined with velvet and lace. Outside, fog presses against the glass like a living thing, its breath mingling with the hiss of gas lamps and the distant cry of a carriage horse slipping on wet cobblestone. In every flicker of light, the city seems to breathe and tremble, its heart beating beneath layers of soot and silence. It is the heart of Victorian London, where invention hums in the streets, but warmth is a fragile thing bought by flame. In grand townhouses, chandeliers glitter above supper tables. In the rookeries, a single candle fights the dark for a few more precious hours. Chimneys cough, windows drip with condensation, and the walls remember every whisper of the lives they hold. The glow of tallow and beeswax binds rich and poor alike, one shared light against a city that never truly sleeps. So, draw nearer to the warmth. Let the shadows deepen around you, and listen to the quiet rhythm of London's heart. This is Candlelight Nights, life and warmth in Victorian London. The story of a city that burned its own darkness away, one flickering flame at a time. The night presses close against the windows, its breath leaving silver traces on the glass. Outside, London lies buried beneath a shroud of fog so dense it seems to swallow the gaslight whole. The city moves quietly, carriages rumbling over wet cobblestones, horses snorting clouds of steam into the dark, boots splashing through the thin skin of rain that coats the streets. From within the narrow terrace houses of Bloomsbury and Clerkenwell, a softer glow pushes back the quiet defiance of candlelight. Behind those windows, each flame trembles like a heartbeat, holding its own against the damp and the endless dark. In one such room, a woman leans close to her candle, the flame reflected in her tired eyes. The wick crackles, bending slightly with the draught that sneaks through the thin brick walls. The table before her is worn smooth by years of elbows, ink stains, and quiet meals. Her needle moves in small, deliberate gestures through a piece of linen, mending a shirt sleeve for a husband who works in the cold. The wax has melted low, pooling around the base of the candlestick, but still she sews. The warmth of that little light seems to cling to her fingers, guiding them, even as the rest of the house sleeps. Beyond her door, the city hums like a machine that never stops. In Whitechapel, coal fires choke the alleys with smoke. In Mayfair, servants trim wicks and polish mirrors for families who dine beneath chandeliers instead of candles. The same fire that warms the rich poisons the lungs of the poor. The same light that gilds marble staircases flickers in the cracks of tenement walls. London burns with 1,000 small contradictions, each one glowing behind glass. A boy passes through, the street below. A matchgirl's brother, perhaps, his arms full of newspapers he could not sell. He pauses beside a lamppost, its flame dimmed by the fog, and cups his hands around a crust of bread gone hard with cold. From an upstairs window, a figure lifts the curtain, a stranger's shadow watching another life for just a moment. Then the drape falls, and both return to their private worlds of silence and smoke. Inside, the woman finishes her mending and leans back, her eyes heavy but calm. The flame wavers once, as if sighing with her. It casts long shadows across the wallpaper, roses faded to the color of old parchment, curling at the edges. The house seems to breathe with her, each creak of the floorboards a whisper, each flicker of light a pulse. She closes her eyes, listening to the city's muffled rhythm, the distant clop of hooves, the faint cry of the night watchman, the rain tapping like fingers against the sill. In that fragile hour before dawn, when the darkness begins to thin but the cold still holds its teeth, the candle burns steady. Outside, the fog thickens, and the city dreams of warmth. For every soul still awake, for every room where the light has not yet died, London seems almost human, tired, breathing, alive beneath its veil of frost. And when the flame finally gutters out, it leaves behind not emptiness, but memory, the faint scent of wax, the promise that warmth will return again when night falls once more. The Thames moves like a slow, sleeping creature beneath the fog. Its surface is the color of pewter, rippling under the faint tremor of the morning tide. Coal smoke drifts low across the water, blurring the outlines of the bridges, so that each arch seems to hang between earth and dream. The air smells of iron, salt, and damp rope, the scent of ships waiting at anchor, their masts like a forest of thin black spears vanishing into mist. From the river's edge comes the creak of wood and the soft lapping of waves against hulls. London wakes first here, by the water, where breath turns to vapor, and every sound feels older than the city itself. A man in a wool cap rows toward the wharf, his lantern swinging at the prow like a restless star. The light catches on his face, hollow-eyed, scarred by years of cold dawns. His coat is soaked through, heavy with dew, but he whistles a quiet tune as he pulls. To the men of the river, the fog is no stranger. It is a companion, a veil that hides their poverty and their labor alike. The barge glides beside a line of others moored together, each carrying sacks of coal, barrels of ale, or crates of fruit gone half to rot. Above them, cranes move with slow, mechanical grace, black silhouettes against the grey. Further along the embankment, women in shawls gather around small fires built from scrap wood and newspaper. They warm their hands, speaking in murmurs, their laughter quick and thin like the snapping of twigs. Behind them, the city looms silent rows of warehouses, each window lit by a single candle in the watchman's room. Every flame flickers in rhythm with the tide, swaying as though the entire city is breathing through the river's lungs. At the foot of Blackfriars Bridge, a boy leans over the parapet, staring at his own reflection trembling in the water. He drops a pebble and watches it vanish without a sound. His father once ferried passengers across the river before the steamboats came, but now he hauls coal in the docks. The boy carries his father's old lamp, its glass cracked, its wick barely holding a flame. Still, it burns. He cups it carefully as the fog curls around him like smoke from another world. Across the water, the first bell of Street Paul's breaks the quiet, a slow, low toll that drifts like an echo through the mist. Pigeons stir on the rooftops, wings brushing against the fog, their feathers silvered by the faintest hint of dawn. The city begins to hum again. The cough of engines, the shuffle of boots, the clatter of milk carts over cobbles slick with river spray. And yet, beneath all that motion, the Thames remains patient. Its surface ripples with secrets, carrying whispers from the heart of the city to the open sea. Candles gutter in windows overlooking the embankment. Their light dances faintly on the current, mirrored 1,000 times until it becomes something endless. When the fog thickens again and the river disappears into itself, London seems to exhale. The bargemen, the hawkers, the watchmen, they all vanish into the same breath of vapor. Only the faint scent of smoke and candle wax remains, mingling with the chill air. The river has no voice, yet it tells the story of the city better than any man. That warmth is not found in fire alone, but in the simple act of surviving, the cold together, one light at a time, reflected on moving water. Night falls like a slow curtain, and the city stirs to life again, one wick at a time. Matches strike against stone, small flares that bloom and die, blooming and dying again in a rhythm that belongs only to London. From the grand houses along Belgravia to the crooked rooms of Whitechapel, the same ritual unfolds. Fingers trembling slightly as they lift a candle to the flame, a breath held, a sigh released. For one more evening, the darkness is kept at bay. In the drawing rooms of Mayfair, servants move in quiet procession, lighting rows of tall wax tapers that reflect in polished mirrors and silver teapots. The air fills with the scent of beeswax and lavender polish, a sweetness that clings to velvet curtains and crystal chandeliers. In these homes, light is abundance, a dozen candles to a table, a fire burning hot enough to keep the frost from even thinking of settling. The glow settles over the laughter of dinner guests, over the chime of cutlery and the rustle of silk gowns, making everything shimmer, soft and golden. like a dream that money can buy. But in the narrow lanes east of the river, the light is thinner, humbler, but no less sacred. A single candle stands between a family and the dark. The mother leans close to mend a tear in her child's coat, her eyes straining, her hands steady. The children whisper stories as the flame sways, their shadows dancing over cracked plaster and peeling wallpaper. Each story told is another reason to stay awake a little longer, to stretch the warmth just one more hour before the wax gives out. Outside, the lamplighters make their rounds. With long poles and soot-streaked coats, they tilt their lanterns toward the sky, coaxing flame into glass globes that hang above the cobblestones. They move through the mist like tall phantoms, leaving behind trails of gold in the gloom. In their wake, the city becomes a constellation, 1,000 small suns blinking to life above doorways, along bridges, across squares. The glow spills onto the wet streets, where it meets its own reflection and multiplies. By the time midnight comes, London looks like a sea of fireflies. The fog moves gently through it, softening the edges until the whole city seems to shimmer unreal, almost holy. A carriage wheel splashes through a puddle that gleams like molten copper. A drunk hums to himself under a lamppost, his breath forming little clouds that vanish as quickly as laughter. Somewhere, a newborn cries. Somewhere else, an old man snuffs out his last candle and lets the dark take him. Above them all, the stars remain unseen, hidden behind smoke and cloud, but it hardly matters. London has made its own heavens here, its own constellations of tallow and gas, of flame and human need. Each candle is a defiance, each lamp a declaration, that warmth, even when borrowed, even when fleeting, can still be beautiful. The city hums beneath the glow, alive and fragile. Somewhere, a single candle gutters out, and another is lit. And so the balance holds darkness and light, want and comfort, life and the promise that tomorrow, when dusk falls again, the ritual will begin anew. Morning breaks pale and reluctant over London, the light weak as if afraid to disturb the city's slumber. Smoke clings to the rooftops, rising in slow ribbons from chimneys that never truly sleep. Along the narrow lanes of Southwark, men begin their work before the sun can thaw the frost. The coal wagons groan over the cobbles, iron-rimmed wheels biting into the stones. Horses snort clouds of steam into the air, their harnesses blackened by soot. The men who drive them move through the fog like shadows, faces grey with dust, scarves pulled tight against the cold. Their voices are rough, muffled by the thick morning air, calling out the same words they have for generations. Coal for the fire, coal for the hearth. For the families inside, warmth has a price measured in shillings and smoke. The rich burn without thought, coal stacked high in their cellars, fires kept roaring in every room. But for the poor, every handful of briquettes must be earned with aching hands. A woman opens her door to the street, clutching a few coins in her palm. She watches as the coalman tips a small bag onto her step. The dust rises in a black cloud that coats her skirt and the pale skin around her eyes. She thanks him softly, though the price has gone up again. Inside, she empties the coal into the small iron grate and breathes a quiet prayer as the flame catches. It is not beauty she sees in that glow, it is survival. The smell of burning fills the city, sweet and acrid, a constant presence that seeps into everything, curtains, hair, even dreams. Above the rooftops, chimneys belch their grey smoke in slow, steady sighs. Each plume tells its own story. Hunger sated for one night, children warmed for one more hour, debts deepened, lungs blackened. The city itself seems to breathe through those towers of soot, each exhalation heavier than the last. In the grander districts, the fireplaces are polished to mirrors. Servants feed the flames with practiced grace, using tongs and gloves so the masters need not feel the grime. Logs crackle beneath mantles carved with angels and ivy, and the flicker of flame paints gold over wallpaper imported from Paris. Guests sip their tea and speak of art, of weather, of politics, never of the cost of keeping the fire burning. Outside their windows, the fog swallows the street. As night returns, the coalmen trudge home through alleys lit by the orange breath of gas lamps. Their boots leave prints in the black slush. Their faces shine faintly from the sweat of their labor. One pauses beside the river, watching the current carry a patch of soot downstream. He pulls his coat tighter, the smell of smoke heavy on his clothes, and for a moment he imagines what it must be like to sit beside a clean fire, to warm one's hands without paying for it in cough and ash. The city exhales again, thousands of chimneys sighing in unison, feeding the night sky with their endless breath. And below, in tenements and parlors alike, London's people sit before their flames, grateful and weary, bound by the same quiet truth, that warmth in this city is both comfort and cost. Every spark has its price, and every ember leaves a mark. The night no longer falls the way it once did. Where darkness used to settle like a curtain over the streets, now it pauses, held back by a new kind of flame, one that does not flicker or tire. The first lamps along Pall Mall blink awake with a hiss and a bloom of blue-white light. It is not soft like candlelight, nor golden like firelight, but sharp and steady, as if the stars themselves have come down to dwell in the streets. For a moment, London holds its breath. The city is learning to glow. Men gather beneath the poles, staring upward with the same mixture of awe and suspicion reserved for miracles. The lamplighter no longer needs his long pole tipped with flame. Instead, he turns a small brass key, and the gas stirs to life inside the globe of glass. A faint hum fills the air, followed by the low sigh of pressure through pipes buried deep beneath the cobbles. The light blooms brighter than any tallow candle could dream to be clean, mechanical, merciless. The fog recoils, its edges turn to gold, and shadows grow thin and sharp. In the taverns near Westminster, the talk is of nothing else. Some call it progress, others call it witchcraft. "Soon the moon won't matter," says one old sailor, his mug clattering against the wood. "They'll light the sky themselves." The younger men laugh, their faces bright beneath the new glow streaming through the windows. But in corners where the old candles still burn, there are those who look uneasy. The light reveals too much, the cracks in the plaster, the grime on their hands, the weary truth in their faces. In Whitechapel, the first gas lamps arrive years later, their pipes running like veins through the crowded maze of streets. For the poor, the invention brings little comfort. The light burns too high, too distant, too clean. Its glow falls upon puddles and broken cobblestones, but never reaches the rooms above, where families still live by candlelight, their walls stained by the smoke of their own survival. The gas belongs to those who can afford it, the dark to those who cannot. But the city changes all the same. After nightfall, London begins to hum with new life. Shop windows shine like small theatres, their goods gleaming behind panes of glass. Couples stroll later, daring the evening to last. Carriages move faster, their horses startled by the unnatural brightness. The air hums faintly with the pulse of invisible fire coursing beneath the streets, a network of veins feeding the heart of a restless empire. In a small room above a printer's shop, a writer sits at his desk, watching the glow outside his window. His ink no longer needs to dry by candlelight. His words spill faster, brighter, under this new, unwavering flame. But he misses the old shadows, the ones that moved and whispered with the light. The gas burns steady, but it never dances. When the last of the lamplighters finish their rounds and the fog rolls in again, London looks both older and newer, a city split in two, half warmth, half invention. The candles still flicker in back rooms and kitchens, but above them, the new lamps burn with a promise that feels almost like warning. The darkness has not vanished. It has simply stepped aside to watch. The frost paints the windows in delicate lace, thin as breath, fragile as thought. Inside, the parlor glows with amber light, a world preserved behind glass and velvet curtains. A fire hums quietly in the grate, its heat licking at the polished fender, while candles burn steady on the mantel. Shadows ripple over the wallpaper, roses, ivy, and the faint shimmer of gilt alive in the flicker. The room smells of cinnamon and beeswax, the gentle perfume of domestic comfort. A kettle sings from the hearth, and a woman's voice answers it softly, humming as she pours tea into fine porcelain cups. The sound of the city is distant here, muffled by heavy drapes and good fortune. Beyond the door, the same night breathes differently. In the street below, the air is sharper, rough with coal smoke and hunger. Carriages roll past, wheels splashing through puddles frozen at the edges. The gaslight throws long, trembling halos over the cobbles. A child presses her face to the window of a bakery, her breath fogging the glass. Inside, loaves glow golden in the warmth of the ovens, but the warmth does not reach her. She wipes a circle into the condensation, stares a moment longer, then walks on, her bare feet whispering against the stones. In the parlor, laughter rises, the sound of guests arriving, shawls shaken free of frost, the clink of glasses. The fire flares brighter as coal is added, and the scent of roasting chestnuts fills the air. A gentleman leans near the window to smoke, his silhouette framed by the glow. Beyond the glass, he can just make out the faint shapes of passers-by in the fog, quick, uncertain movements, the shuffle of bodies keeping close for warmth. He exhales a plume of smoke and turns away, comforted by the light and the nearness of conversation. But even through the thickest curtains, London's heartbeat can't be shut out. The city murmurs beneath every conversation, beneath every polished surface, the rumble of wheels, the shout of a vendor, the faint clang of metal on stone. The two worlds, the parlor and the street, are separated by only a few inches of brick and glass, yet they might as well be continents apart. Down the road, a boy kneels beside a grate, his hands outstretched to steal a bit of warmth from a shop's vent. The rising air smells faintly of oil and dust, but it's enough. He closes his eyes and imagines the life behind the window above him, warmth that doesn't vanish when the fire dies, bread that doesn't have to be begged for. His candle stub has long burned out, the wax hardened cold in his pocket. Back inside, the last of the guests settle near the fire, the glow gilding their faces. The hour grows late, and outside, the fog presses closer, thick as smoke, swallowing the sound of their laughter. For a moment, the entire city seems to exist in layers of warmth and want one world glowing softly within the other. And somewhere in between the laughter and the silence, the light and the frost, London breathes. The flame flickers, the kettle cools, and the night endures, holding its fragile balance of comfort and cold. The candle gutters once, its flame bowing low before rising again, steady and bright. In that brief tremor, shadows shift across the room like living things. The air is thick with the scent of tallow, earthy, faintly sour, the smell of ordinary nights. It clings to curtains, to books, to the very breath of the house. Wax drips slowly down the pewter holder, pale as bone, pooling and hardening in tiny ridges that mark the passing hours more faithfully than any clock. Time, in this room, burns by the inch. The man who tends the flame sits in silence. His spectacles catch the light as he leans over his writing desk, the nib of his pen whispering across paper. He has been here since dusk, drafting letters he will never send, promises to old friends, apologies to ghosts. His hands tremble not from age but from chill. The fire in the grate long ago collapsed into embers. The candle does what it can, painting his face in gold and shadow. The flame wavers with his breath, as though the two share the same fragile rhythm. Upstairs, the landlady moves softly through the corridor, trimming the wicks of lamps that line the staircase. The smell follows her, that faint animal sweetness of rendered fat, mingled with the cold damp that seeps through brick. She pauses at each flame, cupping her hand around it to keep the draught away. Her fingers are red and rough, her movements careful, reverent almost. In a city built on smoke and haste, The tending of light feels like a kind of prayer. Outside, the world glows faintly through the mist. Windows shimmer like eyes half open. Every home breathes its own color of light amber for the well-to-do, grey-yellow for the rest. From above, London must look like a constellation that has fallen to earth, each candle a star slowly dying in its own wax. The man at the desk dips his pen again. The ink has thickened with the cold, clinging to the nib like tar. He writes a few more lines before setting the pen down and flexing his fingers, which ache from stillness. The candle burns low now. Its flame curls inward, smaller, tighter, its halo shrinking. He watches it as one might watch an hourglass empty, resigned, contemplative. When it finally sighs out, leaving only a whisper of smoke, the room folds into shadow. He sits for a moment in the dark, listening to the faint ticking of the clock downstairs, to the city breathing beyond the walls, the muffled hooves, the distant bell, the cough of a neighbor. Time does not stop when the light goes out. It only changes shape. In the quiet, the scent of spent wax lingers, warm and ghostly. It reminds him of every night before this, one of his father reading by lamplight, of the candle that burned at his mother's bedside, of the small, steady flames that have carried him through the years. He lights another taper with what remains of the old one, and for a moment, the darkness recedes. The new flame takes its place, calm and obedient. Outside, the fog thickens, but, inside, the faint light hums like memory, an old promise renewed. Time begins again, one trembling wick at a time. The wind rattles the shutters like impatient hands, and the old building answers with a long, tired sigh. Inside the workhouse, the air is heavy, part human breath, part coal dust, part despair. Rows of iron beds stretch across the long hall, each covered with a coarse wool blanket and a body curled beneath it. The walls are damp, sweating in the cold, their paint flaking away like dried skin. Somewhere down the corridor, a door creaks open and shut, the sound swallowed by the steady hum of sleep and coughing. The candles are few, set high on narrow ledges where no one can reach them. Their small flames tremble beneath the draught, shadows rippling over faces that look nearly identical, hollow cheeks, closed eyes, mouths slack with exhaustion. The light never quite reaches the far corners. There, the dark gathers in folds like an old cloak, hiding rats and the shivering outlines of those who cannot sleep. For them, warmth is a rumor that moves between the beds, a breath of heat from someone's body, the shared weight of another blanket. A boy lies awake near the end of the row, watching the candlelight flicker on the ceiling beams. He counts the seconds between each gutter of the flame, making a game of it, as though time might move faster if he could name its rhythm. Beside him, his younger sister sleeps with her hands tucked beneath her chin, her lips stained with soot from the coal she sorted earlier that day. He can smell the smoke still caught in her hair. Their mother lies a few beds away, her shoulders rising and falling slowly beneath the blanket she pretends is enough. From the kitchen below comes the faint clatter of tin bowls being stacked. The night matron, a broad-shouldered woman with weary eyes, moves through the dim corridor with a lantern in one hand and a ledger in the other. Her steps echo softly on the stone floor. She pauses by each bed, counting, listening, adjusting a blanket here, touching a forehead there. The lantern's light skims across her face, lined, kind but firm. She has learned not to pity, only to persist. Pity burns too fast. Duty burns slow and steady, like tallow. Through a broken pane high on the wall, a thread of moonlight slips in, faint and cold. It mingles with the candle glow, turning the air a pale grey yellow. Dust drifts lazily in the half-light, each mote shining like a suspended star. The boy watches it all, the play of light and shadow, the way the room seems to breathe, and for a moment he imagines the city outside, bright and awake, filled with windows that glow like lanterns against the night. Somewhere, someone is laughing by a fire. Somewhere, bread steams on a table. But not here. Here, The warmth is thin but shared. When one cough fades, another begins. The flame wavers, steadies again. The matron lowers her lantern and whispers something, a name, a prayer, no one knows which, before turning away. The workhouse settles back into its uneasy silence, and when, at last, the final candle sighs out, the dark closes over the room like a blanket. Still, the faint scent of wax lingers, soft and human proof that even in the city's coldest corners, some small light had tried, however briefly, to stay alive. The rain has been falling since dusk, a fine grey drizzle that glazes the window panes and turns the gaslight outside into soft, trembling halos. The widow sits close to the glass, her shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders, her breath fogging the pane with each exhale. Beside her, on a small table, a candle burns low, the flame steady but tired, its base surrounded by rivers of wax that have hardened in delicate folds. The air smells faintly of damp wool, tea gone cold, and the ghost of perfume long faded from the lace of her cuffs. The photograph beside the candle is silvered at the edges from time. It shows a man in uniform, his posture proud, his eyes alive. She touches the frame with one thin finger, tracing the faint line of his jaw. He has been gone 3 winters now, taken by the same damp that seeps into these walls, the kind of slow, creeping illness that steals by degrees. She can still remember the sound of his cough in the nights before he passed, how it rattled, like something trapped deep in the chest. When he died, she kept the window shut for a month, afraid that the cold might carry his absence away too soon. Outside, the street glistens under the rain. A carriage clatters past, its wheels cutting ripples in the puddles. Somewhere, laughter drifts through the fog bright, unthinking laughter from those whose nights still hold warmth and company. The widow listens, and for a moment she allows herself to imagine that she is back among them, that the fire still burns in her hearth, and another chair still stands opposite hers. But when the sound fades, all that remains is the rhythmic tap of rain on the sill and the faint hiss of the candle. The room around her is quiet, almost too quiet. The clock on the mantel ticks like a heartbeat in the dark. Every object seems touched by time, the worn velvet of the chair, the faded pattern of the rug, the tea set with one missing cup. Yet the candle gives the space a strange kind of dignity. Its light softens every edge, blurs every shadow, makes even the cracks in the plaster seem gentle. She has learned to live by that glow. It does not cure loneliness, but it keeps it from becoming unbearable. At times, she thinks of blowing the candle out and letting the room fall into true darkness to see what would happen if the light finally left her. But each night, as her hand reaches toward it, she hesitates. She cannot bear the silence that follows the extinguishing, that sudden, complete absence where even memory feels colder. So she keeps the flame alive, one match after another, one night at a time. Through the window, she watches the fog deepen, wrapping the world in white. The candle flickers once, then steadies, reflected in the glass beside her face, 2 flames, one real, one imagined. She sits there until the wax runs low, until the light becomes thin and golden, until her reflection fades into the night beyond the glass. And when the final spark dies, she whispers his name softly into the dark, as if the city itself might carry it away up through the fog, across the rooftops, and into the quiet where the lost are never quite gone. The tavern sits at the bend of Fleet Street, its windows fogged with warmth and ale, the brass handle polished by 1,000 hands. Outside, the air smells of rain and soot, but inside, it's all smoke and laughter, the sound of tankards clinking, boots stamping, and someone's rough voice breaking into song. The fire in the hearth is alive, its heart red and pulsing, its heat spilling into the room in waves. Every face it touches looks different under its glow, softened, human, momentarily free from the chill waiting just beyond the door. A circle of men crowd near the blaze, their coats steaming, their hands outstretched toward the fire. One tells a story about the docks, another swears he's seen a ghost by the bridge. No one believes him, but they listen all the same because the sound of a story, even an impossible one, fills the spaces that cold leaves behind. Their laughter rises and falls with the flames. The fire crackles like applause. Behind the bar, the innkeeper's wife wipes tankards clean, her cheeks pink from the heat. She knows every patron by the sound of his step. The young ones drink to forget their work. The old ones drink to remember when they had strength to do it. The air is thick with pipe smoke, its ribbons climbing toward the rafters, where they gather like grey clouds. Above them, candles hang in iron cages, their light trembling with each draught from the door. A fiddler plays near the corner, his instrument worn smooth where fingers have lived too long. The melody is simple, a reel from the countryside, bright and defiant. For a moment, the tavern becomes something more than a refuge. It becomes a place where the weary turn to the rhythm of their own hearts, where laughter is louder than hunger, and every man forgets his debts in the shimmer of the firelight. Even the drunk asleep near the hearth, his head resting on folded arms, looks at peace. Outside, the city keeps breathing. The rain thickens, hissing as it meets the gutter flames from nearby street lamps. A lamplighter passes, his shadow gliding across the tavern wall like a ghost of labor. The widow from the street over hurries home beneath her umbrella, her candle waiting for her in the window. But here, within these walls, the night feels far away. The fire eats its logs with hunger and grace, and the warmth seeps into every crevice, into the bones of the old, the hearts of the lonely, the dreams of those too tired to hope. Near closing time, the fire burns low. The light softens, turning faces into silhouettes. One by one, the men drift into the fog outside, their voices swallowed by the night. The innkeeper rakes the ashes, the last glow dimming like an embered sigh. What remains is the faint scent of smoke and ale, and the memory of warmth lingering in the air, long after the fire is gone. When the door finally closes, the city grows quiet again, but the fire has left its trace, in the color of cheeks, in the echo of laughter, in the way the dark seems less absolute. For a few hours, the light has done its work. It has made strangers into kin, and loneliness into something almost gentle. And outside, through the rain, London breathes on. The clock on the wall has long stopped ticking, its hands forever frozen at 10:30. Yet for the seamstress, time moves differently, stitched in thread, counted in seams, measured by the slow exhaustion of her eyes. She sits by a narrow window overlooking the back courts of Spitalfields, where laundry lines hang stiff with frost and no voices drift from the neighboring rooms. Her candle is almost gone, its flame small and wavering, but still she sews. In her world, the night does not end until the last piece of fabric yields to her needle. The room is little more than a box, a bed, a table, a chair, and the constant smell of starch and wax. The air tastes faintly of fabric dust, of lamp smoke, and of bread she has not yet eaten. Her fingers move with a rhythm, learned from years of repetition. Pinch, pull, knot, repeat. She doesn't think any more of what she's making. Dresses for other women, coats for children she will never meet, curtains that will hang in rooms brighter than this one. The cloth passes through her hands, soft and foreign, whispering of lives she knows only through touch. Outside, footsteps echo on the cobblestones. Somewhere, a lamplighter hums to himself, his pole clinking softly as he moves from post to post. The sound travels through the cracked window and finds her like a companion. She imagines him pausing beneath her window, glancing up to see her candle burning. Perhaps he wonders, as she does, who else keeps watch in this city of 10,000 lights. Her shoulders ache, the fabric tugs against the thread, and she pulls it through with a sharp breath, her thumb brushing against the needle's point. A drop of blood blooms against the white cotton. She blots it quickly, whispers a prayer, and keeps going. There is no room for pause. The foreman will come in the morning to collect the week's work, and he will not care that her candle burned out or her eyes blurred before dawn. On the shelf above her bed, a small tin box holds her treasures, a lock of her mother's hair, a dried violet, a letter from a brother gone to sea. She looks at it sometimes when the night feels endless, when the candle burns low and the city outside seems to have forgotten her. The letter smells faintly of salt and distance. She reads the same lines again and again. There's light enough here for both of us, if only you were near. The flame dips, its wick curling like a question. She leans close, her breath stirring it back to life. The fabric beneath her hands feels warmer now, almost alive, as if the candle shares its last strength with her. For a few seconds, she imagines the world as it might look from above the city, glittering with windows like hers, each flame a quiet confession of endurance. When at last her needle stills, dawn is beginning to press against the glass. The candle has melted to a stub, its light a thin gold thread across the table. She gathers her finished work, folding it neatly, then rests her head on her arm. The wax cools beside her, hardening into pale shapes that gleam faintly in the morning grey. In that fragile half-light, the seamstress finally sleeps her dreams, stitched from firelight, silence, and the small, stubborn grace of those who make beauty in the dark. By evening, the fog along Regent Street has turned the air into a soft golden haze. The new gas lamps line the avenue like sentinels, their light bright and unwavering, halos floating in the mist. Beneath them, the city unfolds in quiet splendor, shop fronts gleaming, their glass windows reflecting the glow like pools of honey, and silhouettes of passers-by gliding between the light and shadow. The hum of London breathes here differently, not the clang of factories or the cry of markets, but the murmur of conversation, the clip of polished boots, the rustle of silk. Couples stroll arm in arm beneath the lamps, the men in dark coats and tall hats, the women wrapped in shawls of velvet or lace, their cheeks touched by the cold. Gaslight smooths the sharpness from their faces, softens their expressions until they seem like figures painted in warm oil, romantic, ephemeral, almost unreal. The fog thickens and thins as they walk, creating a moving world of glow and obscurity where no one can quite tell what lies beyond the next pool of light. The city seems infinite, made new again each time a lamp flickers into view. A violinist stands by the curb near Piccadilly Circus, his case open to the night. The tune he plays drifts upward like smoke, winding itself between the lampposts. Coins clink faintly against the velvet lining of his case, bright as sparks. Across the street, a flower girl arranges her small bundles of violets beneath one of the brighter lamps. The petals shimmer pale blue and lilac, almost translucent in the gaslight. When she looks up, her eyes catch the reflection, glowing like glass beads. A gentleman pauses, buys a bloom, and pins it to his lapel before disappearing into the fog. Above the shop awnings, the lamps illuminate more than fashion and faces. They cast their reach into alleys and carriageways, touching everything with a faint metallic gleam. The wet stones shine like mirrors, the horses' flanks gleam with sweat, and the faint drip of water from eaves turns into tiny strings of gold. Children press their noses against the windows of the confectioners, transfixed by trays of sugar-dusted sweets, glowing like treasure. Every pane of glass becomes its own lantern, every reflection another version of the same dream, warmth against the cold, beauty against the endless grey. As the hour grows later, the gaslight softens, the city seems to breathe slower. The violin fades, a light rain begins to fall, and the lamps hiss faintly as droplets touch their iron crowns. Umbrellas bloom across the avenue like dark flowers, moving gracefully beneath the golden haze. Lovers linger under awnings, their whispers blending with the rain. A carriage passes, wheels clattering, its windows lit from within a small, moving world of light gliding through shadow. When midnight nears, the street begins to empty, shop shutters close, laughter drifts away, and the lamps remain quiet witnesses, their glow now gentler, more thoughtful. The last pedestrians walk home slowly, their footsteps echoing in the wet silence. Each lamp reflects in the puddles left behind, hundreds of tiny suns trembling in the water, and when at last the fog thickens again, wrapping the city in its soft, cold embrace, the lamps stand resolute. They burn without need of applause or audience, steadfast, almost tender, keeping watch over a London that dreams beneath their glow. Before dawn, the rooftops of London lie hidden beneath a pale shroud of frost. The world seems still, hushed, as though the city itself holds its breath. But beneath the quiet, chimneys begin to stir. A low rumble rises from the heart of Whitechapel, 100 hearths coughing smoke into the morning air. The first fires of the day come alive, and from the narrow streets, black plumes coil upward like the breath of sleeping giants. In the half-light, the chimney sweeps appear small figures against the whitening roofs, faces darkened by soot, eyes bright against the grime. Their boots scrape over tiles slick with ice, ropes creak, brushes drag, and a thin mist of ash flutters down onto the cobbles below. It mixes with the frost, staining it grey. To the children of London, the world begins each morning like this, a snowfall made of dust and smoke. Inside one of the narrow houses, a young apprentice coughs into his sleeve as he stirs from sleep. He is no older than 12. His lungs ache from the soot, his throat raw with the taste of smoke. The master calls from below, a gruff voice, impatient and familiar, and the boy pulls on his patched coat, still damp from yesterday's frost. There is no breakfast, only a crust of bread chewed on the way to the street. The morning wind bites hard. He carries his brush and rope like a soldier with his musket, though his war is against soot and silence. At the first house, the master gives his orders. Quick now, the flues'll be frozen stiff. Don't dawdle. The boy nods, slips through the back door, and disappears into the narrow mouth of the chimney. The darkness swallows him whole. Inside, the air is close, the bricks pressing against his ribs as he climbs. He moves by touch, hands, knees, breath. Each push sends a little rain of ash down his neck, warm and bitter. When he reaches the bend, he begins to brush, and the chimney comes alive with sound. Scraping, coughing, the soft whisper of soot, falling like black snow. Outside, the master waits by the fire grate, watching the smoke curl out through the roof. The boy emerges at last, ghost-like, coated from head to toe in grey dust. His eyelashes glint with frost. The master grunts approval, tosses him a copper, and moves on to the next house. The boy pockets the coin but does not smile. It will buy him half a meal, maybe a crust and tea if the woman at the stall is kind. As the morning stretches on, the frost begins to melt, and the city returns to motion carts creaking, shopkeepers unlatching their doors, the first vendors calling out their wares. Smoke rises thicker now, blooming above every rooftop until the sky itself turns the color of coal. By noon, the snow is gone. Only the soot remains, blackening every ledge, every window, every breath. The chimney sweeps vanish into alleys, to rest their bones beside weak fires made from stolen wood. Their laughter, when it comes, is soft and brief, drifting upward like sparks. And when evening falls again, London glows, candles lit in parlours, gas lamps hissing to life, hearths roaring behind closed doors. The city warms itself on the very dust of their labour. The snow, now long melted, leaves behind its memory, a smear of ash beneath the light, a quiet mark of all the small hands that kept London's fires alive. Before the first church bell tolls, when the rest of London still sleeps beneath its blanket of fog, the bakers are already awake. The street is silent except for the faint hum of coals being stirred, the clang of oven doors, and the occasional flutter of pigeons startled from the eaves. Inside the bakehouse, the heat builds slow and deep, a steady breath of fire that drives the night's chill back through the cracks in the floor. The air smells of yeast, wood smoke, and faint sweetness, a perfume that seeps into the cobblestones and lingers long after sunrise. A man wipes his brow with the back of his sleeve, streaking flour across his skin like chalk. His arms move with the rhythm of someone who has done this all his life: knead, fold, turn, press a dance between muscle and memory. He hums softly, the tune lost beneath the crackle of the oven. His apprentice, a boy of 16, works beside him, yawning into the heat. The boy's face glows in the light of the fire, a face still half in childhood but hardened by work. Their shadows stretch along the walls, wavering like ghosts as the flames leap higher. Outside, the first hints of dawn creep into the sky, turning the fog a faint gold. The city is still asleep, but the baker's world is alive, dough rising under linen cloths, crocks of butter softening near the fire, wooden paddles sliding loaves into the mouth of the oven. The roar of heat fills the room, muffled by the thick scent of baking bread. Time here is marked not by clocks, but by the sound of crust cracking, the hiss of steam, the sigh of cooling loaves. By the time the first customers appear, the counters are piled high round loaves dusted with flour like fresh snow, golden rolls glistening with glaze, pies still trembling from the oven's breath. A woman with a child in her arms presses a few coins onto the counter, her hands rough from cold. The baker wraps a loaf in brown paper and smiles, slipping an extra roll into the bundle. When she looks away, outside, the fog swirls around her like a shawl as she disappears down the street, the smell of bread trailing behind her. The apprentice stands by the door for a moment, watching the city wake. Milk carts rattle past, their wheels squeaking over the wet cobbles. The butcher across the street lifts his shutters, coughing into the morning air. Somewhere down the road, a lamplighter douses the last of the gas lamps, his pole glinting faintly in the new light. The boy shivers, then turns back toward the warmth. Inside, the baker pulls the final batch from the oven. He holds a loaf to his ear and listens to it crackle, the soft whisper of cooling bread, like rain on paper. For a brief moment, all of London seems to rest within that sound. The promise of warmth, the quiet defiance of hunger, the comfort of something made by hand in a city built on smoke. When the sun finally clears the rooftops, it glints off the bakery windows, catching the flour that hangs in the possibly air like dust made of light. The baker stretches his aching shoulders and smiles faintly to himself. Another night's labor has ended, and outside, the day begins, carried on the scent of bread, drifting through the streets like hope itself. By nightfall, the fog has turned the city into a dreamscape of smoke and gold. The gaslights along the Strand shimmer faintly through the haze, each one a halo blurred by mist. The taverns are alive again, laughter spilling into the streets, the scent of tobacco mingling with gin and sweat. But in the back alleys and narrow lanes, beyond the polished doors and velvet curtains, another kind of music rises, the heartbeat of London's working poor, played in dim halls where the air is thick enough to taste. Inside one such hall, the ceiling hangs low, its beams stained dark with decades of smoke. The floor trembles faintly beneath the shuffle of boots. Candles flicker along the bar, their flames warped by the haze. Every few moments, someone opens the door, and a rush of fog rolls in, swirling through the light before dissolving into the laughter. At the far end of the room, a woman stands on a makeshift stage, a square of wood barely a foot high, a red curtain drooping behind her. She's not beautiful in the way of portraits, but when she sings, the whole room changes. Her voice cuts through the noise like a knife through silk, low, smoky, filled with something too real to name. The song is an old one, about sailors and lost loves, about the kind of hope that never lasts. Men at the tables lean forward, their faces caught in the glow of candlelight. Even the drunkest among them quiet down for a verse or two. The fiddler beside her nods along, his bow dancing over the strings, coaxing a melody that feels as old as the river itself. Near the back, two chimney sweeps sit shoulder to shoulder, their coins spent, their boots caked with soot. One taps the table in rhythm, the other stares into his empty mug as if it holds the sea. The warmth in this place is not from fire, but from closeness, from bodies pressed together, from voices raised, from the collective breath of 100 people refusing to surrender the night. Every laugh, every note, Every glass lifted is a small act of rebellion against the cold. The barkeep moves through the crowd, his apron damp from spilled ale. He pauses to trim the candle wicks, each flame flaring briefly brighter before settling again. For a moment, the room glows like a chapel, faces turned upward, smoke swirling like incense. Then the singer leans closer to the edge of the stage, her hand clutching the microphone stand as if it were a lifeline, and begins the final verse. The melody falters once, then blooms again, rough but radiant. When she finishes, the silence that follows feels like prayer. Outside, the city continues to hum, carriage wheels rattling, bells tolling, river barges groaning through the fog. But in that little hall, time lingers. Someone strikes a match, relighting a candle that had gone out. The flame steadies, and the smoke curls upward, soft and grey, tracing the shape of the song that still hangs in the air. When the crowd finally stirs again, laughter, applause, the clink of coins, it feels as though the light itself has changed. The night is still cold, but it carries music now, and for a few precious hours, London feels warm. The city holds its breath in the hour before dusk, when the light grows thin and the fog begins to stir from the river. That is when he appears, the lamplighter, moving through the streets, with a pole over his shoulder and a slow, measured gait. His boots leave dark prints on the wet cobblestones, and his breath ghosts in the air before him. The gas lamps stand waiting, silent sentinels in the gloom, their glass globes dull and grey in the fading light. By the time he reaches the first one, the sun has already vanished behind the rooftops, and London is beginning to disappear into its own shadow. He stops, tips his hat to no one in particular, and lifts his pole. The hook finds the small lever with a familiar scrape, and in an instant the lamp hisses to life, a pale flicker, then a steady flame. It hums softly in the fog, a new star born on earth. The lamplighter steps back to admire his work, then moves on. Another lamp, another hiss, another pocket of warmth carved out of the dark. He does this each night, hundreds of times, and though few ever notice him, his light shapes the city. Behind him, the glow ripples outward. The fog catches the light and scatters it, turning the street into a golden mist. A woman closes her shutters for the evening and pauses for a moment, her face bathed in the glow. A child watches from an upstairs window, following the lamplighter's progress as if tracing a constellation across the sky. In his small world, the man with the pole is a magician, a bringer of light in a city that so often forgets how to shine. The lamplighter whistles softly as he works. The tune is old, something from his childhood in the countryside, where the nights were darker and the stars brighter. Here in London, the stars are hidden behind smoke, but he has made peace with that. The lamps are his stars now, each one a sun he tends with care. The smell of gas and iron fills his lungs. The fog beads on his coat and beard until he glistens, faintly in the lamplight, a creature half man, half ghost. As he rounds the corner into Cheapside, the city comes alive behind him. Shopkeepers latch their doors, lovers hurry home through the golden haze, newspaper boys shout the last edition into the night. Everywhere he has passed, the lamps hold their posts, steady and unblinking, their reflections quivering in the puddles below. At the end of his route, he stops by the river, where the final lamp stands alone beside the bridge. He lights it with a practiced flick, the flame flaring bright before settling. The water below catches the reflection, a ribbon of gold rippling through blackness. The lamplighter leans on his pole and watches for a moment. The city is awake now, its heartbeat steady, its arteries glowing. He smiles to himself, though no one sees. His work is done for the night. Tomorrow, before dawn, he will return to douse each flame one by one, sending them back into sleep. But for now, he lets the lamps burn. They belong to the city, and to those who walk its streets after dark, sailors, lovers, wanderers, and souls too restless to rest. As he disappears into the fog, the lamps keep their silent vigil. One by one, their flames sway gently in the night air. little suns floating above a sea of shadow, proof that somewhere, unseen, a man has walked through the darkness and left light in his wake. The dawn rises not in light but in smoke. Over the rooftops of Southwark, the first chimneys roar awake, exhaling clouds of grey that twist and billow until they swallow the sun. Beneath that ashen sky, the foundries and mills thrum with life, their furnaces already glowing like molten hearts. The city's pulse beats strongest here, where iron, coal, and sweat shape the rhythm of the age. To stand among these streets is to feel London breathing not gently, but in great, fiery gusts that shake the air itself. Inside the foundry, the heat is alive. Men move like silhouettes through the haze, stripped to their undershirts, faces slick with soot and steam. The roar of the furnace drowns out all speech, yet they communicate through instinct, a nod, a glance, a lift of the hand. Sparks fly with every hammer strike, golden and furious, bursting briefly before dying on the blackened floor. The air is thick enough to taste, filled with iron dust and the faint tang of burning oil. Each breath feels like swallowing fire. A foreman shouts something, his voice swallowed by the clang of metal. The men lift together, their bodies straining in unison to turn a great wheel of iron glowing red from the forge. It moves slowly, reluctantly, like a beast tamed only by muscle and will. When it finally gives, they cheer not loudly, but with the quiet satisfaction of survival. The youngest worker, no more than 16, wipes his brow with a rag already black from the soot. His arms tremble from the labor, but his eyes shine in the furnace's glow. He knows the heat will take years from him, but it also gives him something back, the strange pride of shaping what endures. Outside, the river carries barges loaded with coal, their cargo dusting the water with streaks of black. The dockworkers move with equal rhythm, their hands cracked and raw, their clothes stiff with ash. The Thames itself seems to steam under the weight of it all, its reflection a broken mirror of firelight and smog. From the bridges above, one can see the skyline of chimneys stretching into the mist, a forest of flame, the new cathedral spires of the industrial age. Yet there is beauty in the fury. The fire spills through the open doors of the foundries, lighting the fog from within, so that for a moment the whole city looks like it's burning not in ruin, but in birth. From these furnaces come the bones of progress, the rails that will bind the countryside, the gears that will drive machines, the steel ribs of bridges yet unbuilt. London is feeding on its own heat, forging itself anew each day. When the whistle finally sounds and the fires are banked, the men step out into the cool air, blinking against the sudden dimness. Their faces are ghostly, streaked black and white, where sweat has cut through the soot. They breathe deep, the air no cleaner, but softer somehow. Behind them, the foundry doors close, and the furnaces quiet to an embered hum. The smoke still hangs above the rooftops, drifting toward the sky like prayers written in ash. In the silence that follows, the city seems to rest not at peace, but alive, smouldering, waiting for the next flame, for in London's heart the fire never truly dies. It only hides, glowing faintly beneath the surface, ready to rise again. Evening settles softly over the city, curling like steam around the edges of the rooftops. Inside the narrow terraces of Bloomsbury, the day exhales, boots are set by the door, shawls hung to dry, and the smell of supper drifts up the stairwells. For a few brief hours, London's noise fades to a hum, replaced by the quieter rituals of rest. In one small sitting room, a fire crackles in the grate, casting its light against the worn wallpaper and the polished brass clock that ticks a gentle rhythm above the mantel. At the hearth sits a family, mother, father, 2 children gathered not for ceremony, but for warmth. The father kneels to stir the coals, the poker striking soft music from the iron. The fire answers with a sigh and a flare, its glow deepening from orange to gold. The boy leans forward, eyes wide, watching the sparks twist like tiny dancers before vanishing into the chimney's throat. His sister sits cross-legged on the rug, a cup of tea cooling between her small hands. Outside, a wind presses faintly against the window panes, but here inside, it feels far away, like the sea in another country. The mother pours the last of the tea into her husband's cup. The pot is cracked at the handle, but it has served them faithfully for years. Its glaze stained the color of comfort. Steam curls upward, carrying the scent of leaves, and warmth the smell of endings, of pauses, of brief contentment between long days. The father sighs, stretches his hands toward the fire, and the light settles across his face, softening the lines of fatigue carved there by labor and time. Conversation drifts in low tones, the kind that belongs only to evenings like this. Talk of bills, of neighbors, of whether the price of coal will rise again. The boy tells of a cat he saw chasing a pigeon by the bakery. The girl wonders aloud whether snow will fall by morning. The mother smiles, smoothing the fabric of her apron, and listens more than she speaks. She has learned that quiet holds its own warmth. From the street below comes the faint clip of hooves, the jingle of a harness, the call of a paperboy fading into distance. The firelight flickers against the window, reflected faintly in the glass, like another world trying to peer in. For a moment, the father glances toward it, thinking of those outside, the men on night shifts, the women bent over washboards, the old soldier who sleeps beside the lamppost at the end of the lane. He feels the weight of their unseen presence, the invisible thread that binds all who share the same fog, the same hunger for light. The fire snaps, pulling him back. The children have fallen silent, their eyes heavy, lulled by warmth and the steady heartbeat of the flames. The mother gathers them close, wrapping the worn blanket tighter. The father stands and trims the lamp, lowering the wick until the glow dims to a hush. The tea is gone, the fire low, but the room hums with a kind of peace that costs nothing and means everything. Outside, the fog thickens again, curling against the door. But inside, the fire holds. It burns steady, not bright, not grand, but steadfast. A small promise whispered into the heart of winter. That warmth, once shared, never truly leaves. By midday, Whitechapel is already hidden beneath its own weather, a sky of smoke so dense it dims the sun to a pale coin. The air tastes of iron and soot, of life burnt slow. Chimneys crowd the horizon, coughing their black plumes into the grey. From the ground, the smoke seems to descend rather than rise, settling into every alley, every breath, every thought. It creeps beneath doors and through cracks in window panes, until it becomes part of the body, inhaled, absorbed, accepted. Along the narrow lanes, factories beat their steady rhythm. The sound is everywhere. The grind of gears, the clang of hammers, the thud of looms striking in relentless time. The buildings themselves tremble with it. Inside, men and women work shoulder to shoulder, their faces ghostly under the dim gaslight. The air is thick, warm, and close. Every movement leaves a film of dust on the skin. Every breath feels like swallowing ash. Yet no one stops. The machines cannot rest, and neither can those who feed them. A girl no older than 15 stands at her post beside a spinning frame, her fingers deft as clockwork. She wears a scarf tied over her mouth, though it does little to keep the dust from her lungs. Around her, the room hums with motion belts whirring, wheels turning, the constant rattle of industry. Her eyes sting, her back aches, but her wages keep the fire lit in the room she shares with her mother and 2 brothers. When she leaves each evening, her clothes smell not of home but of smoke, as though the factory itself clings to her. Outside, the streets swarm with noise. Boys push carts piled high with coal. Women lean from windows, shaking dust from their linens only for it to return moments later. The sky above them swirls dark and alive, blotting out the horizon. Even the church steeples look blurred, their crosses fading into haze. From somewhere unseen, a bell tolls noon, deep and weary, its sound swallowed quickly by the city's endless breath. On Commercial Street, a coal wagon overturns, spilling its load across the road. The driver curses, his voice hoarse from shouting against the noise. Children dart forward, grabbing loose chunks before he can stop them, treasures to keep their families warm through the night. The coal stains their palms black, but they grin all the same. To them, the soot is not a curse, but a kind of currency, proof that warmth can still be won from the city's heart. As dusk approaches, the smoke thickens again, wrapping Whitechapel in a twilight of its own making. Lamps glow faintly through the murk, small, trembling stars in a sky that no longer knows night from day. The people move through it like ghosts, their outlines blurred, their voices softened by the weight of the air. Above, the factory chimneys continue their endless sermon, each plume a prayer, rising toward a heaven long since hidden. When at last the whistle blows and the machines fall silent, the stillness feels almost holy. For a few moments, no sound but the wind moves through the streets. Then doors creak open, boots scuff the stones, and the workers pour out, their faces streaked with ash, their eyes bright with the fragile light of endurance. The smoke does not lift. It never truly will. It hangs there, eternal and familiar, marking this place not as cursed, but as alive proof that London, even at its dirtiest, still burns with the will to survive. The attic smells of linseed oil and dust. A single window faces north, clouded with soot, filtering the grey daylight into something softer, more forgiving. In this narrow room above a crowded London street, a painter stands before his canvas, brush poised but motionless. The city's sounds rise faintly from below the clatter of hooves. A hawker's call, a child laughing somewhere far away, yet none of it feels real up here. Only the light matters. It drifts through the window like breath, cool and uncertain, touching everything with the tenderness of a memory. He steps closer to the canvas, squinting. The work is nearly finished. A street scene at dusk, a lamplighter in the fog, a woman with her shawl drawn close. The colors are muted ochres, smoke blues, soft grays, yet within them, the fire burns quietly. He dabs at the corner of the sky, blending the yellow of gaslight into the violet hush of evening. The paint catches on the coarse weave, glinting faintly when it meets the sun. That glow, that fleeting shimmer where pigment meets air, is what he has been chasing all his life. Behind him, the small stove ticks as it cools. The tea he brewed hours ago sits cold in its cup, a thin film gathered on its surface. He doesn't notice. His mind is fixed on the window, on how the light keeps changing. In London, it never stays still. It hides behind fog, reflects off soot, softens against rain. It's a living thing, restless, shifting, impossible to hold, and yet it's what he paints again and again. Not the city itself, but the light that forgives it. Outside, a gust of wind rattles the panes. He looks down into the street below, carts rolling through puddles, women carrying baskets of coal, a newsboy darting between carriages. The scene unfolds like a moving painting, framed perfectly by his narrow window. He knows the moment won't last. Soon the fog will rise from the river, swallowing color and sound alike. He lifts his brush, quick now, trying to catch it before it's gone. The strokes come faster, freer, blue into grey, grey into gold, until the figures seem to breathe. When the candle beside him flares, he steps back to watch how its light plays on the wet paint. The glow shifts over the canvas, turning shadows to warmth, grime to grace. For a moment, it feels as if the whole room is part of the picture, the candle, the dust, his own reflection in the darkened glass. He remembers a night years ago, standing by the Thames with his sketchbook, the river swallowing the city's lights into trembling bands of gold. He had thought then that London was cruel. Now he knows it is only vast, and that within its grey heart, beauty hides like a shy flame. The brush slips from his hand and clatters to the floor. He doesn't pick it up. The painting is done, or nearly. He leans against the wall, breathing the scent of turpentine and ash, watching as the last of the daylight fades. The candle guttered once, twice. then steadies its small flame mirrored in the wet paint, alive in a world that will never know him. Below, the city keeps burning, its light caught in puddles, in windows, in every piece of glass that remembers the day. And above it all, in a little attic room, a painter rests beside his quiet miracle, the proof that even in the darkest city, the light never truly dies. In the alleys behind Bishopsgate, the nights belong to the children. When the gas lamps sputter low and the fog begins to creep in from the river, they emerge from doorways and cellar steps, thin shadows with quick feet and louder laughter than the city ever expects at that hour. They carry their treasures in their pockets, bits of string, matchsticks, scraps of tallow stolen from the backs of taverns. The grown world sleeps or drinks or works, but for these children, the streets are their fire-lit playground. A boy with soot-darkened hands strikes a match against the wall. The flame leaps to life, small and fierce, reflected in his eyes. For a heartbeat, the alley glows. The others gather close, 4 of them, barefoot and shivering in their patched coats. They cup their hands around the light, faces golden in the flicker, breath visible in the cold. The boy laughs and drops the match before it burns his fingers. It falls into the wet cobblestones with a hiss and dies. The darkness swallows them again, but not their voices. "Do another," one girl cries, her hair tangled, her cheeks smudged. He grins, striking another match, and the spark flares again, painting them all in quick strokes of gold and shadow. In that instant, they are no longer urchins. They are kings and queens of their own little world, surrounded by palaces of brick and smoke. The flame dances between them like a secret, something precious and forbidden. Beyond the alley, the city hums the deep murmur of 1,000 unseen fires. In the windows of the tenements, candles burn low behind thin curtains. Somewhere down the street, a woman hums a lullaby to a child too young to understand hunger, and above it all, the lamps hang suspended in the fog, their light diffused into halos, each one like a watchful moon. The children glance up at them and wonder what it would feel like to touch that light, to be warm all the time. A constable passes at the corner, his lantern swinging, his boots echoing in the night. The children scatter at once, slipping into shadows as easily as smoke. When the sound of his steps fades, they return, breathless, laughing, clutching their matchsticks. The boy lights one last flame and holds it high. "For luck," he says. They watch it burn, their faces quiet now, reverent. The fire bends in the wind, then snaps out, leaving behind a trail of grey smoke that curls upward and vanishes. One by one, the children drift away, swallowed by doorways and stairwells, leaving only the faint smell of sulphur and rain. The alley grows still. A cat moves through the darkness, its eyes catching the last gleam from a puddle, reflecting the gaslight above. The silence that follows feels almost holy, as if the city itself is holding its breath. By morning, no trace of them remains but the matchsticks' little black bones scattered across the stones. The lamplighter will pass by, his pole touching each lamp awake again, never knowing how much those small hands envied the very thing he tends. And though the fire they played with lasted only seconds, its echo lingers in the fog, the laughter of the children of the glow, who made their own light in a world that gave them none. Beneath the cathedral, where the stone breathes cool and the air tastes faintly of wax and dust, the light moves softly. Candles line the crypt, their flames small but steady, casting halos on the marble effigies that sleep in perfect silence. The echo of footsteps lingers here longer than sound should, bouncing from wall to wall until it fades into the hush. This is where London remembers itself, not in noise or motion, but in the slow pulse of light flickering against ancient stone. It is evening, and the caretakers have long gone. The great doors above are locked, and the world outside fades to fog and darkness. But below, the crypt lives by candlelight. Shadows tremble across carved faces, saints, soldiers, poets, kings, each flame catching in the hollows of their eyes, as though life might stir again if the wax held out long enough. Between the tombs, thin trails of smoke drift upward like the ghosts of prayers never spoken aloud. A single figure kneels near the center, a young woman with a basket of candles and a taper lit from her own small lantern. Her hands are chapped, the skin roughened by winter and work. But she moves with the quiet precision of someone who understands reverence. Each candle she lights replaces one that has died, her fingers careful not to leave a mark on the fresh wax. The faint scent of tallow mingles with the dust of centuries. As she moves, her light brushes over plaques inscribed with names that time has nearly forgotten: explorers who charted seas, writers who charted hearts, the countless nameless who lie beneath the stones. When she pauses to rest, she looks upward, following the great sweep of arches that vanish into the dark. Somewhere far above, the bells hang silent, their ropes coiled neatly, waiting for dawn. She imagines what it must sound like from heaven's side, the chime not of iron, but of light itself ringing through clouds. She wonders if the dead hear it too. From the corner of her eye, she catches the flicker of movement, just the shift of flame against stone, but it startles her all the same. She laughs softly under her breath, her voice swallowed by the echo. Loneliness feels different here, not empty but vast. The air hums faintly, as if every candle keeps a secret. The longer she stays, the more she feels the city breathing above her, the thunder of carriage wheels, the creak of wood, the faint murmur of the river, all softened by the layers of stone and time. When her work is done, she stands back to look. Hundreds of candles burn now, their light mingling into one golden sea. The marble faces glow warm, their rigid mouths almost kind. For a moment, the crypt feels alive, as if London's dead are not sleeping, but listening. She extinguishes her lantern and turns to leave, her footsteps fading into the stairwell. Behind her, the candles continue to burn, their flames bowing gently in the draught that follows her out. The last thing she sees before the door closes is the shimmer of light pooling over the cold floor. Fragile, flickering, eternal. Above her, the cathedral looms dark and silent against the night, but beneath it, the glow remains a quiet heartbeat of faith and fire beneath the stone skin of the city, whispering to the living that even in the depths, light endures. The city sleeps in layers, fog over stone, silence over breath, dream over memory, and through it all walks the night watchman, his lantern swinging like a slow pendulum of gold. His boots echo down the narrow lanes of Holborn, their rhythm steady, almost musical, marking the hours between dusk and dawn. He walks not with haste but with ritual, for this is his kingdom, the dark hours when the world forgets itself and must be kept. The lantern's glow stretches long across the cobblestones, carving small sanctuaries of light in a sea of shadow. Each time he passes a doorway, he pauses, listens, a habit more than fear. The city's noises are quieter at this hour, but never gone. There's the scurry of a rat beneath the barrels, the far-off groan of a wagon wheel, the faint creak of ships shifting on the river. Sometimes he hears weeping through the walls, muffled, exhausted, the kind that comes from people who have run out of words. He never lingers long. London has too many sorrows for one man to count. He makes his rounds by instinct now, down Fetter Lane, past the print shops where the presses sleep, their metal mouths still, across the courtyard of the counting house, where a single candle burns in a window, forgotten by the clerk who fell asleep at his ledger. The watchman tips his hat to it as he passes, the gesture solemn, almost superstitious, a courtesy between two kinds of endurance. The night air smells of coal smoke and wet iron. It clings to his coat, seeps into his lungs. He coughs, clears his throat, hums a tune he cannot remember learning. The song fills the silence, rising and falling like the tide. Once, years ago, he sang for company in taverns, at the docks, for coins tossed into a hat. Now he sings to keep the ghosts at bay. In Chancery Lane, he stops before a small chapel. The steps glisten with frost. Inside, The faint glow of votive candles trembles through the stained glass, painting the fog outside in patches of crimson and gold. He stands there a moment, lantern beside his boot, hat in hand. He doesn't pray, not exactly, but he bows his head all the same, as if acknowledging something older than the city, something that still listens. When he turns to leave, a soft sound catches his ear, the shuffle of footsteps, not his own. He raises the lantern, its light spilling out like a living thing, and sees a child peering from behind a post, a small bundle clutched to her chest. Her eyes widen in the glow. "Lost, are you?" he asks. She nods. He sighs, sets down the lantern, and kneels so that the light falls on both their faces. "Come on then," he murmurs. "We'll find where you belong." By the time they reach the constable's post, dawn is brushing the sky with grey. The lamps flicker and fade one by one, surrendering to daylight. The watchman watches the horizon lighten, his lantern dim in his hand. Another night kept, another morning earned. As he turns for home, he glances. Back at the waking city, smoke rising, windows opening, life returning. For a brief, quiet moment, the light of his lantern and the light of the sun mingle in the mist, two small flames greeting each other before one fades away. The night in St. Thomas's Hospital is never truly silent. Even when the wards fall still, the air hums faintly the rustle of linen, the drip of water, the slow turning of bodies half awake in their sleep. Somewhere a patient coughs, a clock ticks without conviction, and the city beyond the windows breathes in its usual rhythm of smoke and rain. Yet in the midst of that great, weary darkness, there is one point of light that never fails, a single lamp, carried in steady hands down the endless corridor of the sick. The nurse moves like a ghost through the ward, her shoes whispering against the cold stone floor. Her lamp casts an oval of gold that sways with her steps, brushing over the faces of those who dream and those who do not. The light catches on bottles of carbolic, on bandaged limbs, on the white curve of a patient's knuckles gripping the blanket. The air smells of alcohol and fever, sharp, clean, and human all at once. She pauses beside an old soldier whose breath rattles softly in his chest. The glow pools across his pillow, warming the grey pallor of his skin. "You're not alone, love," she murmurs, adjusting the sheet. He doesn't wake, but the tension in his jaw loosens. She moves on, careful not to let the lamp sputter in the draught. The flame inside is fragile but alive, a small mercy, in a place where mercy is often rationed. At the far end of the ward, another nurse sits at a desk, her head bent over a ledger. Ink stains the cuffs of her uniform, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She glances up when the light nears, and for a moment the two women share a smile that needs no words. It is a smile of understanding that this hour belongs to them alone, when the rest of the world is sleeping and they are the keepers of its breath. Outside the window, the river glides past, black and endless. Its reflection swallows the glow of the city, hundreds of lamps trembling on its surface, like stars that have fallen from grace. The nurse catches a glimpse of her own lamp mirrored there, doubled and deepened by the water, and she wonders how many lights it takes to hold back the dark. She suspects it has never been enough. The door at the end of the corridor creaks open, and a doctor enters, his boots tapping briskly. He nods to her, murmuring something about rounds, but his eyes linger on the lamp. "Still burning?" he asks. She smiles faintly. "Always." Hours later, when the first grey light of morning filters through the high windows, the night nurse returns the lamp to its place on the shelf. The glass is warm to the touch. The wick glows red before she finally breathes it out. The scent of oil lingers in the air, mingling with the damp chill of dawn. She looks once more down the corridor, the beds, the still forms, the quiet she has kept. Then she draws her shawl around her shoulders and steps outside, where the new day rises pale and uncertain. Behind her, the hospital sleeps for a moment in its own faint afterglow, and the world feels almost healed, as if the flame she carried through the night has left a trace of warmth in every heart it touched. The great engines awaken before dawn, shuddering in their stalls like beasts eager to run. Inside Paddington Station, the air is alive with sound, the rhythmic chuff of pistons, the clang of metal couplings, the rising hiss of steam curling toward the rafters. The gas lamps still burn above the platforms, their glow fractured by the drifting fog, so that the whole place seems caught between night and morning, between dream and industry. Passengers stand in small clusters, their breath mingling with the smoke, their faces lit by the amber haze that hangs heavy in the air. At the far end of the platform, a porter wipes his brow with a soot-stained handkerchief. His cap is tipped low, his voice hoarse from shouting over the noise. He moves with practiced rhythm, lifting trunks, slamming carriage doors, calling destinations through the din. Behind him, the train breathes like a living thing, its boiler glowing faintly red in the gloom. Every few seconds, it exhales a burst of white steam that billows upward, folding into the air like silk before vanishing into the rafters. The scent is everywhere, iron, oil, and the faint sweetness of coal dust, the perfume of the age. A young woman waits beside a pillar, her gloved hands clasped tightly around her ticket. Her dress is travel-worn, hem darkened by London's grime, but her eyes are bright, alive with something between fear and wonder. She has never been this far from home, never felt the tremor of a world in motion. The platform shakes beneath her feet as the engine tests its strength, and she imagines, for a moment, that she can feel the whole country pulsing beneath the rails, a heartbeat made of steam. Outside, the city is waking. The first carriages roll past the station gates, wheels cutting faint grooves through the soot-black snow. Smoke rises from chimneys in thick plumes, joining the clouds that cling to the rooftops. The sky above London is the colour of pewter, and the sun hides somewhere behind it, unseen but felt. For the men who stoke the engines, dawn means labour, their bodies slick with sweat, long before the day begins. They shovel coal in steady rhythm, feeding the fire that feeds the machine. Their faces are blackened, their eyes bloodshot, but there's pride in their work. They know they are the keepers of progress, the ones who make the world move. When the whistle blows, the platform erupts into motion. The sound cuts through the air like a blade. Steam bursts upward, swallowing everything in a sudden white blindness. The woman steps forward, clutching her bag to her chest. A porter takes her arm, guiding her to the carriage door. For a heartbeat, the whole world is sound, the roar of pistons, the clang of wheels, the cry of gulls from the river. Then, as the train begins to move, the chaos fades into rhythm, a steady, mechanical lullaby carrying her away. From the footbridge above, the watchman raises his lantern, watching as the engine disappears into the fog. The tracks gleam behind it, black and wet, vanishing toward a horizon that does not yet exist. The station falls quiet again, save for the hiss of cooling iron and the faint rain tapping against the glass. And in the stillness that follows, it seems as if London itself exhales, steam rising, soot settling, the city caught between the fire that drives it forward and the darkness that never truly lets it rest. Snow falls softly over Grosvenor Square, settling on the shoulders of the stone lions that guard the great houses. The lamps glow pale through the flakes, their halos trembling in the cold air. Along the avenue, carriages arrive one by one, wheels crunching through the thin crust of ice. Inside each, the warmth glitters, women draped in silk and fur, men in polished boots and top hats, the air perfumed with lavender and champagne. The night is alive with laughter, the clatter of hooves, the whisper of servants' voices, ushering guests up the marble steps. Through the tall windows of the ballroom, the light spills like honey into the snow. Chandeliers hang from the ceiling, each drop of crystal catching fire in the glow. The orchestra tunes quietly in the corner, violins sighing, a harp shimmering like breath in the cold. The room smells of beeswax and perfume, of roses brought in from greenhouses that never knew frost. On every table, candles stand in silver holders, their flames reflected endlessly in mirrored walls. At the top of the staircase, Lady Havisham surveys her guests. Her gown, pale blue satin trimmed in lace, rustles faintly as she moves. The diamonds at her throat catch the candlelight like captured stars. She greets each arrival with a smile that has been practiced into perfection. Behind her, servants glide with trays of champagne, their eyes lowered, their shadows swallowed by the glow. The music begins a waltz, slow and graceful, and the couples move as one tide across the marble floor, their reflections swirling beneath them in the polished stone. Outside, just beyond the circle of light, a group of beggars huddle by the iron gates. They watch the windows flicker, the dancers turning in gold and white, their laughter faint and distant. A boy presses his hands to the bars, his breath fogging the air. The light inside looks warm enough to burn. Beside him, a woman coughs into her shawl and pulls him close. They say nothing. Words would only make the cold feel sharper. Back inside, the waltz swells. The orchestra's bows flash in unison, the music rising until it seems to fill the very air between heartbeats. Guests murmur about the beauty of the decorations, the elegance of the arrangements, the generosity of their hostess. But no one notices how the servants near the door rub their hands together for warmth, or how one candle sputters and gutters out, leaving its corner of the room in faint shadow. Near midnight, Lady Havisham signals for silence. The music fades, and she raises her glass, her voice clear and bright. "To charity," she says, "to kindness, and to those less fortunate than ourselves." Applause follows, soft and sincere enough to sound like rain. When the music resumes, she turns to the window, her reflection joining the hundreds that dance in the glass. Outside, the snow has thickened, erasing the footprints of the poor who have already drifted away. By the time the final carriage departs, and the candles are snuffed, the ballroom lies quiet again. Only the scent of roses remains, and the faint echo of music fading up the stairwell. In the street below, a boy finds a scrap of ribbon that blew from one of the guests' coats. He ties it around his wrist and smiles faintly, his breath clouding the frozen air. Behind him, the house stands dark, its warmth locked within, its windows gleaming like eyes that have already forgotten what they saw. Beneath the railway arches of Clerkenwell, where the air never dries and the stones sweat with cold, the city's forgotten huddle together for warmth. The wind moans through the tunnels like an animal mourning, scattering scraps of newspaper and coal dust. Night has fallen hard, a black, biting cold that seeps into the bones and settles there. Above, London glitters in its 1,000 windows, its lamps hissing in orderly rows. But down here, under the arches, the light is a luxury measured in sparks. A fire burns weakly in an old iron barrel, fed by rags, splinters, and whatever the scavengers could find before dark. The smoke drifts low, acrid, stinging the eyes but offering a comfort that feels almost human. Around it sit 6 figures, bundled in layers of threadbare coats and blankets. The eldest, a man whose face might once have been handsome, turns a tin cup slowly in his hands, watching steam rise from the small pool of water inside. "Boil it slow," he mutters, "makes it taste warmer." The others nod, though they all know warmth is mostly in the pretending. Beside him, a woman hums softly, cradling a bundle wrapped in a grey shawl. It's not a child, but a pile of rags, her only blanket. Her lips move to a tune that has no words, one she hums to fill the emptiness between hunger and sleep. A boy of 10 sits cross-legged near her, poking at the fire with a stick. His hair is stiff with soot, his fingers are blue with cold. He looks up every so often at the arches above, half expecting to see a train thunder past, its wheels flashing like stars. But tonight, the tracks are silent, the city above lost in fog. Further down, 2 men argue in low voices about the price of coal. They had once worked at the docks before illness took their strength. Now, their days are spent searching for discarded fuel, a single lump of which could mean the difference between life and another night of frostbite. The talk fades when the fire cracks, throwing a brief burst of light that paints their faces, hollow eyes, chapped lips, skin drawn tight over bone. For a moment, they look like statues carved from the soot itself. Across the street, behind frosted glass, a bakery's lamps burn bright. The smell of bread drifts faintly through the air, soft and cruel. The boy catches the scent first and closes his eyes. He imagines a loaf warm in his hands, the crust cracking, the steam rising. The fantasy is so vivid that his stomach growls aloud, and the woman reaches out, resting a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Sleep. Love," she whispers. "Dream of it instead." The fire burns lower. One by one, the figures lean closer, their shadows merging until they are one shape in the flicker of the dying light. A draft slips through the tunnel, stealing the last bit of warmth. The man with the cup sets it down, now empty, and watches the steam vanish. He doesn't move to relight the flame. There's nothing left to feed it. Above them, London hums, carriages clattering, laughter spilling from parlours, the faint toll of a distant clock marking another hour survived. Under the arches, the fire sighs and dies, leaving only the echo of breath and the faint scent of smoke. The poor sleep where the warmth once was, their bodies curled around ashes. And when morning comes, the city will step over them, as it always does, never realizing that its own great fire burns because they keep feeding it in silence, in shadow, and in the cold. In a small room above a printer's shop on Fleet Street, a candle burns low beside a sheaf of unwritten letters. Its flame bends gently with every breath of air that slips through the window frame, painting gold across the paper and trembling on the edge of ink. The wax has begun to lean, a long tear forming down its side. But the writer does not notice. He sits hunched at the desk, pen poised, his shadow stretching over the wall like a second man waiting for words to come. The clock in the corner has just struck 2. Outside, the city mutters in its sleep the distant roll of carriages, the bark of a stray dog, the faint cry of the watchman marking the hour. The candle's scent, faintly sweet with beeswax, mingles with the sharper tang of printer's ink and dust. The room feels suspended between worlds. Not quite night, not yet morning. The writer dips his pen and begins again. "My dearest Anna," he writes, though he knows she will never read it. The name curves across the toaded page with the weight of habit, a name he has written 100 times in the years since her death. The words that follow are less certain. He speaks to her as he once did when she sat by this same desk, mending a torn sleeve or reading quietly in the lamplight. He writes of the city, of how the fog has not lifted for a week, of how the milk has soured twice in the cold. He writes as though she might still answer, as though her silence were only distance, not absence. Now and again, he stops to watch the candle's reflection in the ink bottle, one flame doubled, one trembling in still water, the other in glass. His hand trembles slightly, and a blot blooms on the paper. He curses under his breath, then smiles at his own impatience. There was a time when she would have laughed at that, would have placed her hand over his and said, "Let it stay, it looks like a teardrop." He continues until the page fills, then folds it carefully, sealing it with the small brass stamp he still keeps in the drawer. There is no address, only her name. The wax seal hardens under his thumb, and he holds it there for a moment longer than necessary, feeling the faint warmth beneath his skin. On the street below, footsteps pass a milkman beginning his rounds, a lamplighter lowering his pole to snuff the last of the night's glow. The world is stirring, indifferent, eternal. The writer leans back, watching the candle burn shorter, its flame now small and blue at the core. Shadows dance across the spines of books lining the wall, histories, sermons, letters of others long gone. He wonders whether anyone ever truly stops writing to the dead, or whether memory simply becomes another kind of correspondence. When the candle finally sighs out, the room falls into darkness, broken only by the faint grey wash of dawn creeping through the glass. The writer does not move. The last wisp of smoke curls upward like a departing spirit, vanishing into the pale morning air. The letter lies beside him, sealed and unsent, Another message, waiting for a hand that will never open it. Yet still, the faint smell of wax lingers, soft, comforting, and human, the scent of words that refuse to fade, even when the light is gone. The studio smells of chemicals and dust, a sharp tang of silver nitrate, vinegar, and something metallic that lingers on the tongue. The walls are lined with draped velvet, heavy curtains meant to catch the light and silence the world outside. A single window faces north, its panes clouded with soot, the sunlight weak and filtered, but the photographer prefers it that way. Too much light, he always says, ruins a face. The truth hides better in shadow. He moves like a man, half asleep, deliberate in every motion. His fingers, stained with developer, lift the black cloth from the camera and spread it over the tripod like a priest preparing an altar. Beneath the hood, the brass glints faintly. The lens stares back at him, patient, unblinking, merciless. He adjusts it with care, then turns toward his subject. A young woman sits in the wooden chair at the center of the room. Her dress is plain, a faded gray trimmed with lace at the collar. Her hands are folded neatly in her lap, but her knuckles are white. The photographer studies her face without speaking. She is not beautiful in the way magazines would have her be, but something in her gaze, still, uncertain, aware of its own fragility, draws him closer. He gestures for her to raise her chin. She does. The faintest thread of light slides across her cheek. "Hold very still," he murmurs, his voice low, as though he fears disturbing the air. He steps behind the camera, lifts the plate, and waits for the light. In the silence, she can hear her own heartbeat, the slow drip of liquid from the developing trays, the hum of the street far below. A cart rolls past, its wheels striking stone, and then the world holds its breath. The flash erupts like lightning, a blinding bloom of white that fills the room, sharp and sudden as thunder without sound. For an instant, she sees nothing but light. Then, as her vision clears, the air fills with the faint scent of sulfur and smoke. The photographer lowers the hood, blinking spots from his eyes, his heart hammering with the familiar thrill. The moment is gone, yet caught forever, her face, her stillness, her borrowed eternity. He slides the glass plate into its frame and disappears into the darkroom. Behind the door, the red lamp glows like an ember. The woman listens to the quiet slosh of liquid, the click of metal trays. The smell of chemicals deepens, and faintly, the image begins to appear. He watches as her outline emerges, first a ghost, then a person, then something between the two. Every portrait begins this way, a spirit called into being by light and silver. When he returns, he holds the photograph delicately by its edges. "There," he says, almost reverently. She looks, and in the flat grey of the print she sees herself transformed, her fear replaced by calm, her imperfections softened into grace. It is her, and not her. It is what the city makes of everyone. Something fleeting made permanent, something living made still. Outside, the fog presses against the glass, turning the daylight thin and white. The photographer sets the finished print on the windowsill to dry. For a moment, the reflection of the flame from his lamp flickers across it, making her eyes seem to move, her lips to breathe. Then the light shifts, and she is gone again, fixed forever in silence, in smoke, in the quiet glow of a London morning. The boy follows his father through the fog each evening, his small boots splashing in puddles that mirror the lamps above. He carries nothing, just his breath puffing white in the air, and the awe that comes from watching fire bloom at the end of a pole. His father moves with practiced rhythm, stopping beneath each lamp, tilting the hook, releasing the hiss of gas. Then the spark. The light flares, warm and round, and the boy's face glows gold for a moment before fading back into shadow as they move on. His father never speaks much while he works. The city is his companion, and he listens to it the way a sailor listens to the sea. He hears when the fog thickens, when footsteps echo in ways they shouldn't, when the gas burns too faint or too blue. The boy, meanwhile, hums under his breath little tunes half remembered from his mother, who died the winter the lamps froze. The notes rise softly into the night, and sometimes his father hums the next line without realizing it. They begin near the river, where the lamps stand tallest, guarding the docks. The air there smells of tar and salt, of wet wood and iron. Barges slide like shadows across the Thames, their lanterns swinging. The boy pauses to watch one pass, its reflection trembling in the black water. "They look like stars," he whispers. His father glances down, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Aye," he says quietly, "and we keep ours right here on the ground." They climb toward the streets of Holborn, where the houses crowd close and the fog hangs thick as wool. Windows glow faintly behind lace curtains, some bright with laughter, others dim with loneliness. The boy peers in as they walk, catching fragments of life. A woman brushing her hair before bed, an old man dozing by a fire, a cat leaping onto a windowsill. Every lamp they light reveals another small world hidden in the mist. By the time they reach their final street, the boy's hands are numb inside his mittens. His father lowers the pole and crouches to adjust the lantern on his belt. "Here," he says, passing the boy a match. "Go on then. The last one's yours." The boy hesitates, the lamp looms above him, the glass fogged, the metal slick with frost. He strikes the match anyway. For a second, the flame flutters uncertainly, then steadies. He reaches up, guided by his father's hand on his shoulder, and touches it to the lamp's heart. The light flares, golden and whole. They stand for a moment beneath its glow. The fog pulls back just enough to reveal the street, stretching away a row of lamps flickering in perfect order, a path of tiny suns cutting through the dark. The boy smiles, wide and wordless. His father ruffles his hair, the motion rough but tender. "That's the way of it," he says, one light at a time. When they turn for home, the lamps burn behind them like a trail of embers, each one humming faintly in the night air. The city sleeps beneath their glow, unaware of the small boy who kindled the last flame, unaware, too, that somewhere in the fog, a lamplighter's son has decided he will keep the darkness at bay for as long as his hands are steady and the matches hold. It begins as a whisper, the faint crackle of paper catching, the soft sigh of heat waking from slumber. Inside the print shop at the corner of Fleet Street and Farringdon, a candle has burned too low, its flame kissing a loose sheet of proofing paper. By the time the apprentice smells the smoke, the edges have already curled to black lace. He lunges forward, knocking over a pot of ink in his panic. But it's too late, the flame has leapt, quick and hungry, from one sheet to the next, climbing up the wooden rack where fresh newspapers hang like drying laundry. The shouts come first, then the bells. "Fire! Fire! On Fleet!" The night erupts with sound boots pounding on stone, iron doors slamming, horses shrieking in their stables. Within minutes, the air is thick with smoke and chaos. The press that once sang with the rhythm of ink and metal now moans under the roar of flame. Hot wind pours through broken windows, scattering pages into the sky, headlines and half-printed, words twirling upward, stories undone before they could be read. Outside, the fog glows orange, an unnatural dawn. The gas lamps look dim beside it, their steady flames swallowed by the great, pulsing light of destruction. Men run with buckets from the pump, their faces slick with soot and sweat. The fire reflects in their eyes, in the polished brass buttons of their coats. It dances across the glass panes of nearby shops, a fever that spreads through reflection alone. At the corner, a woman clutches her child and stares upward as the roof collapses in a rain of sparks. "It's the devil, come to read," someone mutters, and another spits into the gutter for luck. The heat rolls down the street like a wave, pushing back even the bravest. The apprentice, his face streaked with ash, stands beside the fireman, trembling. He can hear the presses melting iron, surrendering to flame. He thinks of the words he'd set only hours before, stories of invention, reform, progress. Now, those same words feed the fire, their ink hissing as it burns. By midnight, the blaze is visible from the river. The Thames carries its reflection like molten gold, rippling with every gust of wind. Bargman paused to watch. their silhouettes outlined in the glow. The bells of street brides toll above the chaos, their sound muffled but resolute, a call not for faith but for endurance. When the fire finally dies, what remains is silence. The air still shimmers with heat. Charred beams jut from the ruins like the ribs of a giant beast. The cobblestones are slick with ink and ash-black rivers frozen in place. A single press, half melted, lies beneath the debris. Its letters, once so full of power, are now fused together, unreadable. The apprentice kneels beside the wreckage, his face grey in the dawn light. He reaches for a scrap of paper that has survived the corner of a headline, the word hope printed clear and untouched. He holds it close as the first snow begins to fall, the flakes turning to steam when they touch the warm stone. Around him, the city stirs, already forgetting, already beginning again. By noon, Fleet Street smells of wet smoke and ink. Printers sweep the ruins, their boots leaving prints across the soot. Somewhere, a new press rumbles to life, the voice of the city refusing to be silenced. And when dusk falls, the lamplighters return, their poles lifting the flames back into place above the street that burned, as if nothing had ever gone dark at all. The fog drifts low over Spitalfields as dawn creeps in, pale and exhausted. The street lamps are still burning, their light faint and buttery in the morning mist. Beneath one of them, the seamstress walks home, her basket heavy on her arm. Her steps are slow, deliberate not from age, but from the weight of sleeplessness. She has spent another night sewing in the back room of the factory, patching uniforms for men she will never meet, stitching until her fingers numbed and the candle burned to a stub. The world is quiet at this hour. The only sounds are the scuff of her boots on the cobblestones, the echo of her own breath, and the faint cry of gulls wandering in from the Thames. She pauses once to adjust the shawl around her shoulders, pulling it tighter against the damp cold. The fabric smells faintly of smoke and soap, of the lives that press too close together in the crowded tenements. When she reaches her building, she hesitates before the door. The brick is slick with frost, the wood swollen from rain. She runs her hand over it as though greeting an old friend, then pushes it open and climbs the stairs. Each step creaks under her weight. On the landing above, a candle flickers in a glass jar, the offering of some neighbor who fears the dark. She touches it lightly as she passes, a gesture of gratitude. Inside her room, the air is still, touched by the faint perfume of old cloth and tallow. The single window faces east, where the light is beginning to gather, soft and grey. She sets her basket on the table and unpacks her tools, scissors, thread, needles, scraps of muslin, arranging them in neat rows. Habit, not hope, drives her. Then she reaches for the small mirror hanging beside the window. The glass is cracked, its reflection split into halves, but she studies her face all the same. The skin beneath her eyes has deepened to blue. Her hands, when she lifts them, shake slightly in the morning chill. In the street below, a cart rolls past, piled, with loaves of bread still steaming from the oven. The scent finds its way through the cracks, filling the room with warmth she cannot afford. She closes her eyes and remembers her mother's kitchen long ago, the sound of laughter, the feel of fire on her face, the softness of dough under her palms. The memory comes like sunlight through fog, brief and aching. When she opens her eyes, the room feels colder. She takes one of the scraps from her basket, a torn piece of crimson velvet, and holds it to the window. In the morning light, it glows like a coal, alive for just a moment. She smiles faintly, then sets it aside and begins to mend a soldier's coat. Her stitches are small and precise, steady as prayer. Each one feels like a heartbeat against the silence. By the time the city fully wakes, her candle has burned low again. The seamstress does not notice. The grey light of London has returned, filling every corner of the room, illuminating her bent head, her patient hands, and the threads that gleam like veins of silver against the cloth. Outside, the church bells begin to ring, their sound rising through the mist, distant, solemn, and kind. For a brief moment, as she listens, She imagines that each chime is meant for her, that somewhere beyond the smoke, someone is keeping count of the small lights still burning in the dark. Then she lowers her head once more and sews. The shop at the edge of Lambeth smells of wax and smoke, a scent that clings to everything, from the rough-hewn counter to the old man who stands behind it. His hands, once strong, now tremble slightly as he pours melted tallow into a row of waiting moulds. The wax shimmers like liquid pearl under the lamplight, thick and slow-moving. He works in silence, broken only by the soft drip of wax cooling on the wooden table and the distant toll of a bell from Street Mary's. Each movement is deliberate, ritualistic, the craft of a man who has spent half a lifetime shaping light. The candles cool quickly in the winter air. He waits, breath visible in the chill, then pries each one loose with the care of a father handling a newborn. They come free with a faint sigh, their surfaces pale and smooth, their wicks dark and soft at the tip. He lines them on a shelf beside others, tall ones for the churches, stubby ones for the poor, perfumed beeswax for those who can afford the luxury of a sweet-smelling flame. His fingers run over them gently, checking for cracks. Every candle, to him, is a life waiting to burn. From the back room comes the sound of a broom on the floorboards. His daughter, Eliza, sweeps up the remnants of yesterday's work, curls of hardened wax, bits of wick, a trail of dust that glows faintly in the slanting morning light. She is 19, her hair the color of straw darkened by smoke, her eyes soft but tired. She hums as she works, a tune she learned from her mother, who died in childbirth long ago. The melody twines through the air like thread, weaving itself into the rhythm of her father's work. "Did you sleep?" she asks, without looking up. He shakes his head. "No need. You'll fall asleep standing one of these days." He smiles faintly. "Then at least I'll be upright when I meet my maker." Eliza rolls her eyes, but says nothing. She knows he will never rest, not while orders still come in from the churches and merchants. The shop has kept them alive through every hard winter, the wax paying for bread, the light buying warmth. But she also knows the strain in his hands is worsening. The tremor grows stronger each week, and though he hides it well, she sees how his fingers sometimes freeze around the mold, how he stares at the wick as though it's slipping away from him. By afternoon, the room glows gold with the work of their hands. Candles line the walls like soldiers standing at attention, their scent thick and sweet. The old man sits beside the window, trimming wicks by the light of the very candles he made. Outside, the street fills with fog and the cries of hawkers. Eliza brings him tea, her hands still red from the heat of the wax. "They're beautiful," she says quietly. "Every one of them." He looks up, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "They don't stay beautiful long," he says. "They live to disappear." He lifts one candle, its surface smooth and perfect, and sets it alight. The flame blossoms instantly, soft and steady, reflecting in the glass panes of the window. "But if a thing must vanish," he adds, "let it vanish doing what it was made to do." The room fills with the warm hum of silence, the steady burn of a single flame surrounded by hundreds yet to live. The wax begins to drip, slow and golden, tracing paths down the candle's side like time itself melting into memory. And for a moment, father and daughter watch together as the light trembles and steadies again, fragile, yes, but still alive, and enough to hold back the dark. By morning, the frost has spread across the butcher's window like lace, a pattern delicate enough to belong to a wedding veil. If not for the cold that bit it into being, the glass gleams faintly in the grey light, misting with the breath of the city. Behind it, the butcher sharpens his knife with slow, deliberate strokes, the steel hissing in rhythm against the whetstone. He hums under his breath, though it is not a song but a kind of habit, a sound to fill the silence between the scraping of blade and bone. The shop is narrow, lined with hooks and chains that glint faintly under the gaslight. Each morning he scrubs the counters until they shine, though the scent of blood never fully leaves the air. Outside, the milk carts rattle past, and the first customers appear, housewives clutching baskets, their shawls drawn tight. Their cheeks raw from the cold. He greets them by name, his voice rough but warm, his hands moving with the familiarity of repetition. 2 cuts of mutton. Mrs. Ashby, a bit of suet with that? The women nod, grateful for his steadiness. The butcher is one of those rare London men who still believes in fairness, who weighs honestly and wraps the paper with care. He never cheats the poor, though it means little profit. His own hands are cracked from the brine, his nails rimmed with salt and fat, but his eyes, pale grey, like the sky before snow, hold a softness that surprises people. They have seen him carry a shivering stray into the back room to warm by the stove, or slip a small piece of meat into a hungry child's pocket with a wink and no word. On the counter near the window, a single candle burns. He keeps it there not for light, but for comfort. Its flame flickers against the glass, glowing through the frost like a heart behind skin. He tells himself it keeps the place alive when the day grows long and the streets outside fall into silence. Sometimes, when he looks at it, he remembers his wife, her laughter, her hands dusted with flour, the warmth she brought to this same room before the fever took her 3 winters ago. The shop had felt colder ever since. As the day wanes, the last customer leaves, and the butcher wipes his hands on his apron. Outside, the sky fades to pewter, and the lamps along the street begin to bloom one by one. The frost on the window catches their glow, scattering it into 1,000 tiny stars. He stands for a moment, watching the light change, then turns back to the counter. The candle has nearly burned down, its wick leaning into the pool of wax below. He lifts it, careful not to spill, and holds it close to the frost-bitten glass. For an instant, the world beyond disappears. No carriages, no chimneys, no noise. Only the soft dance of flame reflected endlessly across the ice. He presses his hand to the cold pane, feeling the faint vibration of life outside. Footsteps, laughter, the sound of hooves fading into fog. Then, with a long breath, he sets the candle down and begins to clean his knives. When he finally blows out the flame, the smoke curls upward, tracing thin ribbons in the air. The frost catches its last glimmer before swallowing the light whole. The butcher stands in the half-dark, surrounded by silence, his reflection faintly visible in the window, a tall, lonely figure framed by a city that never truly sleeps, only exhales between fires. And though the candle is gone, the warmth it left seems to linger, like a heartbeat echoing from the glass. When dusk falls, the fog moves first, rolling low along the gutters, swallowing cobblestones and boots alike until the street becomes a river of smoke. Then come the lamps, one by one, waking with a hiss. Their light stretches long and thin across the wet stones, trembling as if afraid to exist in such a city. From above, it might look like a trail of small suns winding through the heart of London, a constellation mapped not in stars, but in flame. On this street, light and shadow share a fragile truce. The lamps burn golden, steady, while the fog coils around their bases like a jealous lover. Everything looks softer here, the iron fences, the glint of carriage wheels, the pale faces that pass through the glow, and yet beneath that gentleness lies something else. The quiet pulse of survival, the unspoken law that those who walk these streets after dark must belong to them. A flower seller lingers beneath one lamp, her tray half empty, her fingers stiff from cold. She hums to herself, her voice cracked but tender, the same tune she's sung since morning. The light catches the edge of her shawl, turning its frayed ends into threads of gold. Beside her, an old man sells roasted chestnuts, the smoke rising in soft curls that mix with the fog. He calls out to passers-by in a voice both weary and kind, his eyes glowing like embers under the brim of his hat. Further down, a policeman makes his rounds, his lantern swinging at his side. Each time it passes near a street lamp, the two lights meet, his portable flame greeting its fixed brother, and for a brief moment, the darkness between them retreats. He tips his hat to the flower seller, nods to the chestnut man, and moves on. His footsteps echo against the stone, rhythmic as the beating of the city's heart. Across the road, A carriage halts beside a row of houses. A gentleman steps down, coat collar high, his breath visible in the chill. Behind him, a woman waits inside the carriage, face hidden by a veil. The lamplight glances across the glass just long enough to reveal her hand, pale, delicate, gloved in white. Then the door closes, and both disappear into the night. The carriage wheels rattle away, scattering puddles that catch the lamp's reflections and shatter them into hundreds of golden shards. For the children who sleep beneath these lamps in doorways, under arches, beside barrels warm from the day's fire, the glow is both safety and reminder. It means warmth is near, but never theirs. Still, they huddle beneath it as though it were a sun, their shadows stretching across the cobbles, long and thin and fragile. The city keeps them in its light, but not in its heart. As the hours pass, the fog thickens again, swallowing the far end of the street. One by one, the lamps fade into blur, their halos bleeding together until it's impossible to tell where one ends and another begins. The chestnut man packs his cart, the flower girl slips away, and even the constable's footsteps vanish into the grey. Only the lamps remain faithful, patient, unblinking their flames, whispering softly in the damp air. They do not ask who passes or who lingers, who sins or who prays. They simply burn. And in their glow, London endures another night, trembling, alive, wrapped in smoke and silence, waiting for the first pale breath of morning to find it again. The dawn over Shoreditch is pale and slow to rise, as if the light itself is reluctant to touch the streets below. The fog still clings to the brickwork, soft and sour, carrying with it the ghost of coal smoke and damp cloth. Beneath an archway, a cart creaks to life, its wheels wobbling, its sides patched with scraps of rope and iron. The rag seller pushes it forward with both hands, his shoulders stooped, his breath curling in the cold. The iron rims grind against the cobbles, each turn of the wheel a weary hymn to survival. He is a man of middle years, though his face looks older, lined deep by weather, stained by soot. His coat is threadbare, its collar torn, his cap pulled low over hair gone grey. The city has made him invisible. He walks through its heart unseen, yet he sees everything. The pale light on the rooftops, the faint glow in the windows where bakers begin their trade, the paper boys running with the news of deaths and victories no one in his quarter can afford to care about. "Rags! Rags and bones!" he calls, his voice rough from the night air. It echoes faintly between the walls, stirring no curtains, waking no souls. Still, he keeps calling. His cart is his livelihood, filled with the city's cast-offs, with the torn and the broken, with what the rich no longer see fit to keep: buttons, bottles, scraps of linen, a bent candlestick, a single glove. He collects what others discard, trading their refuse for pennies, stitching together his days from what London throws away. He stops before a doorway where the stone steps are slick with frost. A maid opens it, eyes downcast, and tosses a bundle into his hands, old sheets, yellowed with time. "Here," she mutters, already turning back inside. "Mind the silver buttons." He nods, though she's gone before he can reply. He folds the cloth carefully, as though handling treasure, and lays it atop the pile. Beneath his roughness, there is a strange tenderness to his work, a reverence for the forgotten. As he moves through the narrow lanes, the city begins to wake. Chimneys breathe again, windows open to let out sleep and take in the morning's soot. The rag seller stops by a tea shop, warming his hands against the steam that escapes from the doorway. The scent of bread reaches him, sharp and kind, but he does not go in. Instead, he unwraps a small bundle from his coat, yesterday's crust of bread and a heel of cheese, and eats slowly, eyes half closed, savouring the illusion of warmth. He remembers his wife, long buried, and how she used to light a candle in their window each morning, a sign, she said, that no one truly wakes until they are seen. Their window has long since gone dark, their house taken by another, but the memory burns steady in him. Sometimes, when he passes the glassmaker's stalls, He stops to look at the lamps and imagines her light among them, still shining somewhere beyond his reach. By noon, his cart is full again. He ties the rope around it and begins the slow walk home through the smoke-thick air. The city swallows him as it always does, folds him into its grey heart. To those who pass, he is just another shape in the fog, another shadow moving through morning. But the lamp above him burns brighter for a moment as he passes beneath its flame, bending toward him, as if the light itself recognizes the one who gathers what the world forgets and gives it, in his quiet way, a second life. The widow lives on the top floor of a narrow house near Clerkenwell Green, where the roof leaks and the stairs groan like old bones. Her neighbours rarely see her except on market days, when she walks slowly through the stalls with her black shawl drawn close and her coin purse clutched tight in her hand. They call her Mrs. Finch, though few remember her first name, and fewer still remember the man she once married. Time has thinned her to almost nothing, a wisp of grey hair, a figure too small for her coat, but her eyes remain sharp, bright as 2 drops of melted glass. Each night she lights the same candle, the last of a bundle her husband had bought years before he died in the foundry explosion that took 12 men and left only their boots. She keeps it on the sill beside the bed, where its flame trembles against the pane. Outside, the lamps along the street blur through the frost, but this small light is hers alone, a private star in a city that swallows all others. The candle burns unevenly now, the wick bending toward the window as though straining to see the world beyond. She sits beside it, knitting slowly, her needles clicking like clock hands. The rhythm comforts her. It feels like conversation. Sometimes she murmurs aloud to the empty room, scraps of news she's heard from the market, memories of her husband's laughter, fragments of prayers that have lost their endings. "It'll be another cold one, Thomas," she says softly. "You'd hate it. You would." The pipes froze again this morning. Below her the city murmurs, the creak of wagon wheels, the call of a hawker selling coal by the bucket, the faint, mournful song of a street violin drifting up through the fog. London is never truly silent. Even its quiet is alive, breathing, whispering, shifting in its sleep. The widow listens, her needles slowing, until the music fades into the hum of wind. When the candle gutters, she rises to trim the wick. Her fingers are thin, bones mapped beneath translucent skin. She remembers how Thomas's hands used to cup hers when she worked too long at the wash basin, the warmth of him lingering even after he'd gone back to the forge. That memory keeps her steady as she pinches the flame upright again, coaxing it to stand tall. It obeys, small but resolute. She moves to the window and looks down. Across the street, a young couple walks arm in arm, their laughter carrying faintly upward. Their lantern swings with each step, casting ribbons of light on the walls. For a moment, she feels a flicker of envy, not for youth, but for companionship. Then the feeling softens into something gentler, like gratitude for what once was. Before bed, she takes a piece of paper from her drawer and writes her husband's name again. Just his name, nothing more. She folds it carefully and slips it under the candle, where the wax has formed a small pool. Tomorrow she will melt it away, another offering, another night survived. When the flame finally dwindles to a pinprick, she whispers, "Good night, my love," as she always does. Outside, the fog presses against the window, curious but uninvited, and as the wick sighs into darkness, the faint scent of smoke curls through the air, a ghost of warmth, the last breath of a light that refuses, even in death, to leave her alone. It is the eve of Christmas, and the fog over London is so thick it feels like breath turned solid, a living thing pressing against every window and bell tower. The city has been swallowed whole. Gas lamps glow as faint orbs in the whiteness, their light dissolving just a few feet beyond. Somewhere along Fleet Street, a carriage wheel catches in the ice, a horse screams, and the sound dies as quickly as it was born. The fog devours everything but sound, and even that it muffles into a low hum. But inside Street Dunstan's, the air is different, warmer, trembling faintly with music. The church is old, its stones darkened by centuries of soot, its ceiling vaulted high enough to disappear into shadow. Rows of candles flicker along the pews, their flames bending as people shuffle into their seats. The smell of beeswax and evergreen boughs fills the air, mingling with the faint scent of wet wool and smoke carried in from outside. At the front stands the choir, a collection of boys, wrapped in scarlet cassocks, their cheeks pink from cold. They shift nervously, whispering to each other in small, anxious bursts, while the choirmaster clears his throat and raises his hand. When the organ begins, the sound rolls through the church like thunder softened by velvet. The boys draw breath as one, and then the first notes rise clear, fragile, and impossibly pure. The hymn floats upward, curling through the candle smoke, filling the hollow spaces between the arches. In the bleak midwinter, they sing, and the words seem truer than ever. Outside, the fog presses harder against the glass, as if trying to listen. A woman in the front row closes her eyes and weeps quietly. A lamplighter who slipped in to warm himself bows his head, his cap clutched in his hands. Even the children, usually restless, sit still, their small faces glowing in the candlelight. The choir sings on, their voices weaving together like threads of gold in the dark. The sound becomes something larger than human, a kind of warmth that moves through the crowd, softening the ache that lives in every London heart. The poor, the rich, the lonely, the faithful for a few minutes, they breathe the same air, bound together by sound and light. When the hymn ends, silence settles like snow. The choirmaster lowers his hand, and for a moment no one moves. Then, from somewhere deep in the nave, a cough breaks the stillness, followed by a sigh, then the quiet murmur of coats rustling as people prepare to leave. The candles flicker in the draught as the door opens, and a ribbon of fog snakes in, pale and trembling. Outside, the bells begin to ring. Their notes are muffled, as though struck underwater, yet they carry deep and sonorous through the sleeping streets. The choir boys spill out into the night, their laughter echoing faintly, their breath rising like smoke. For a moment, the world feels gentler. The fog softens the gaslight into halos. The snow begins to fall in slow, forgiving flakes, and London, weary, grey, unending, seems almost holy. In that narrow window between silence and sound, between darkness and dawn, the city holds its breath. And somewhere above it all, unseen but certain, the song still lingers pure, human, and alive, burning quietly against the cold. The night settles hard over Whitechapel, sharp and cold enough to bite through wool. Frost glitters along the gutters, turning puddles into thin sheets of glass that crack beneath each passing step. The lamps burn weakly through the fog, their halos trembling, while the wind carries the smell of coal smoke and roasting chestnuts through the crooked lanes. Near one such corner, a girl no taller than the lamplighter's pole sits on the curb with a box of matches at her feet. Her hands are red and raw, the nails rimmed with grime, but she guards her box like treasure her whole fortune for the night. Her name is Nell. She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning, though she still tells herself she isn't hungry, only cold. Her dress is thin, her stockings full of holes, and the ribbon once tied in her hair has turned grey with soot. Each time a passerby approaches, she calls out in a voice too hoarse for her age, "Matches!" A penny, a bundle, but most hurry by, heads bent, boots, striking the cobblestones like small refusals. A few glance her way, pity flickering across their faces before it hardens into guilt. Pity, she has learned, is just another kind of silence. Across the street, a baker's window glows golden. The warmth inside spills out each time the door opens, releasing the rich scent of bread. Nell stares until her breath clouds the glass, then looks away. She opens her matchbox and pulls one out, just one, striking it against the wall. The flame leaps up, fragile but fierce, painting her face in light. For an instant, the world around her disappears. The frost, the hunger, the long dark street. All she can see is the small miracle between her fingers, flickering like hope itself. The wind catches it, and it dies. She tries again. The second flame burns steadier, its glow reflecting in her eyes. She imagines herself in her mother's kitchen, the hearth roaring, the kettle singing. She remembers the feel of warm bread torn in her hands, the way the butter melted before she could swallow. The flame shrinks, bends, and fades. Nell strikes another. This one lights slower, trembling, as though uncertain. She shields it with both hands, her breath forming a little cave of warmth. She whispers to it nonsense, lullabies, words meant to keep it alive. For a heartbeat, it seems to listen. Then it gutters and goes out, leaving her in darkness once more. The bells of midnight toll somewhere distant. A few late revelers stumble past, their laughter rising and falling before the fog swallows it whole. The girl curls her knees to her chest, the empty matchbox beside her, her head resting against the frozen wall. She feels her eyelids grow heavy, her body slow. Somewhere, deep within her memory, she hears her mother's voice again, soft, calling her name, telling her to come inside. She smiles faintly, eyes half closed, and reaches for another match. When the lamplighter finds her at dawn, the box is empty. A small pile of blackened sticks lies beside her hand, and a faint smell of smoke lingers in the air. The lamps above her still burn, steady and gold, untouched by the night. He kneels, removes his cap, and bows his head. Then he lights one of his own wicks from the nearest flame and lets it burn low, a small tribute for a small girl who kept her own light, however brief, against the darkness. By the time the fog lifts, the frost has melted, and the first carts rattle through the street. The lamplighter moves on, his pole raised, his eyes bright with reflection. Behind him, the lamp glows a little warmer than the rest, as if, for one more hour, her tiny flame had joined it, defying the cold, turning the dark to gold. It begins with the wind, a low groan pushing through the alleys, tugging at the rooftops, rattling the shutters until the city seems to shiver. The fog rolls back from the river like a tide retreating from shore, and in its wake comes the rain, fine, cold, relentless. By nightfall, London is drenched. Water trickles through gutters, down lampposts, and into the cracks of the cobblestones, pooling in the hollows of forgotten steps. The city that once glowed like 100,000 candles now flickers weakly under the storm. The lamplighters make their rounds anyway. They always do. But tonight, their poles meet more wind than flame. One by one, the lamps hiss and sputter, their glass darkened by rain. Some fight to stay alive, their wicks bending, their flames trembling like frightened hearts, but the storm takes them, one by one. Soon, whole streets vanish into shadow. The glow that once marked the lifeblood of London is gone, swallowed by weather and water and night. In a tenement on Berner Street, a seamstress wakes to darkness. Her candle has drowned in its own wax. The fire in her grate has turned to ash. She wraps herself in a blanket and listens to the storm batter the window. The sound reminds her of the river, of the wind that carried her husband's ship away years ago. She can almost hear his voice in the thunder, not calling her name, but singing, the way he used to on calm nights when the world was smaller and kind. She closes her eyes and hums the tune, just to keep him alive. Across the city, in a small watchman's hut by the river, an old man trims his lantern and holds it to the glass. The light barely pierces the rain. He can see the outline of the bridge, a dark ribcage against the water, but beyond that, nothing. He remembers a time when he could walk home by lamplight, when the city shone bright enough to see the steeples of Street Paul's from here. Now, he is the only light left on the quay. He sets his lantern by the window so that anyone might see it. In the churchyard at Street Dunstan's, the candles gutter one by one. The choir boys, who had sung so brightly only nights ago, are home in their beds, dreaming of warmth. But a caretaker moves slowly through the aisles, collecting the stubs and wiping melted wax from the pews. When the last flame dies, he stands for a long time in the dark, listening to the rain tapping against the roof. Then, almost without thinking, he whispers a prayer, not for salvation, but for endurance. And still, the city breathes. The rain slackens. The fog returns, gentler now, curling along the streets where water gleams like silver. The gas lamps, dark for hours, begin to hiss again, first one, then another, until a faint line of light threads its way through the gloom. It is not brilliance, only persistence, the stubborn will of a city that refuses to be extinguished. By dawn, London glows once more, softly, imperfectly, like the memory of a dream. Smoke drifts above the rooftops, bells ring in the distance, and the river shines pale beneath the new light. In windows and doorways, people stir from sleep, drawn by that fragile brightness. The city is awake again, and though no one speaks it aloud, everyone feels it that the fire of London, though battered and dimmed, still burns somewhere deep within, waiting to rise whenever the night grows too long.